If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1, A Reunion. Under a clear, starry sky, in the middle of a vast ocean, there lay a small island densely covered in trees. A pale and emaciated young boy sat on the beach, his eyes deeply sunken, showing clear signs of malnutrition. Though he wore tattered, worn-out clothes, one could guess he was around 15 years old. The boy looked with a complex expression at the creature beside him. The creature stood only as tall as a child's knee, its body completely covered in black feathers without a single mark. If it weren't for the bright moonlight, it would have been nearly impossible to see it in its entirety. With a trembling hand, the young boy slowly reached out to the creature before him. Just before touching it, he hesitated for a moment but finally decided to proceed, placing his hand on it. Feeling the real texture under his hand, the boy let out a soft sigh, his gaze relaxing. "Who would have thought, I'm back," Cain murmured in a soft, aimless voice. Everything felt as if it had happened just yesterday. As a powerful trainer with the strength of an almost elite level, Cain still remembered how he barely survived after being captured by Team Rocket for an experiment. With his skills and special abilities, he managed to make his way up the ranks within Team Rocket, earning a certain reputation even in the underworld. However, during an ambush by the League, he was caught in a trap set by a rival within Team Rocket. His overconfidence after rising to the near elite rank led him to believe he could survive the attack, but he didn't expect the League to send 2 elite-level trainers just to capture him. Although the opponents didn't use their most powerful Pokémon, Cain couldn't withstand them. With no escape, he fought with all his strength and managed to kill 2 Pokémon from the second team of the League's operatives, but in a fit of rage, they both buried him alive underground. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in the present scene. With effort, Cain stretched out his hands. All the scars from wounds and training had disappeared. His hands, yellowed from malnutrition, clearly showed the veins and bones. He clenched his fists with all his strength, his nails digging into his palms without realizing it. "Caw!" Murkrow murmured softly, looking at him with curiosity as if he were a completely different person. Hearing Murkrow's sound, Cain tried to smile, but it seemed his muscles had forgotten how. He stroked Murkrow's back again. It wasn't smooth, clearly reflecting the same malnutrition as him. "Murkrow, I'm glad you're here," Cain said, his voice filled with mixed emotions. In his past life, Cain had always been inflexible in his ways. Although he later changed, it was too late. But Murkrow, his first Pokémon, had always been by his side from the beginning, not only as his closest guardian but also his best friend. Even in his final moments, Murkrow never abandoned him. In contrast, all those other powerful companions he had captured, bought or stolen left him. Only Murkrow remained loyal, and because of that, it was the one thing Cain regretted. "Caw!" Murkrow murmured. Though it didn't quite understand why, it could feel the affection emanating from the person in front of it. It was only the first time they met, and although it didn't understand the reason, Murkrow didn't want to attack him. That's why, when Cain freed it, it neither attacked nor tried to escape, it only observed him curiously. Cain was astonished. In his past life, he had needed a great effort to capture Murkrow and a long time to fully understand this unique creature. The time wasted in that process still filled him with regret. As someone who had only seen some anime and knew little about Pokémon, he wasn't familiar with their species, traits, abilities, or training methods. In this world, it is said that a Pokémon's potential depends on its talent, but its development depends on the trainer. Cain didn't know how many wrong paths he took before fully understanding all of Murkrow's traits. Only after that was he able to train it completely, but by then, it was too late, and part of Murkrow's potential had been lost. In his past life, Cain excelled in trials thanks to Murkrow and its innate talent, despite the many mistakes made during its training. Moreover, due to the excessive abuse of Murkrow's potential, Cain eventually abandoned it. "Murkrow, in this life, I'll never abandon you again," Cain said, his hands trembling slightly as he petted Murkrow. "Caw!" Murkrow responded, as if sensing the complexity in Cain's heart. Cain smiled faintly. At last, his body seemed to remember how to smile. However, his heart tensed a little. Judging by the current situation, it seemed he had just been captured and brought to this deserted island, forced to receive his first Pokémon. If he survived the trial, it was all thanks to Murkrow. It's worth noting that most of the Pokémon assigned in Team Rocket's trials were Zubat, Coughing, or Icans, while Murkrow was a much rarer creature. After receiving a Pokémon, the first test was to subdue it. This wasn't an animated world, this was a real world, and Team Rocket's Pokémon were not tame. Their wild instinct often led them to attack as soon as they were freed, even killing and then fleeing. In the first test, where 300 young people aged 15 to 18 faced off, only 150 or 160 survived. The cruelty was evident, nearly half of the participants died in the first trial. An elimination meant death. After the trial, only 50 survived. These 50 were divided among the various teams and divisions of Team Rocket, becoming almost insignificant members. Only the top 10 could choose which division to join, and only the top 3 became Team Rocket officers. The first in the trials received a rare starter Pokémon. In this world, starter Pokémon are extremely valuable, and outside of privileged league members, it is nearly impossible to find them in the wild. Team Rocket rewarded the best with high potential starter Pokémon. In Cain's past life, the one who came in first chose a Bulbasaur. Thanks to that Bulbasaur, he rose to become a Team Rocket senior officer, reaching almost elite level, just one step away from becoming an elite level trainer. As one of Team Rocket's protégés, his future was bright, it was said he would become one of the next executives. Though Cain also performed well in his past life, he was far from that person. Over time, he ended up working under his command, so he knew his career well. Cain dusted himself off and slowly stood up. His body remained still as he recalled something. If he had returned to this world, then that something should also be here. System, activate. Cain thought silently. Activating system. After 10 seconds, just when Cain was about to give up, a mechanical voice sounded in his mind, like an emotionless robot. So, it's real. Chapter 2, System Activation. As I suspected, when I first arrived in this world, this system came with me. Even Cain, who was used to remaining calm, couldn't help but feel excited. In his previous life, he had managed to reach the power of a quasi-elite trainer thanks to this system. However, in his past life, the system activated by accident, and by the time he discovered it, he had already been surpassed by others. Despite the system's help, catching up had been extremely difficult. System, scan. With his heart racing, Cain turned his attention to the Murkrow beside him and gave the mental command. Almost instantly, beep. A detailed 3D model appeared before his eyes, visible only to him. Pokémon, Murkrow, green. Gender, male. Level, 8. Types, dark, flying. Ability, prankster, allows status moves to be used first. Held item, none. Egg moves, punishment, power equals 60 plus enhancement level *20, dark, physical, feint attack, power equals 60, dark, physical, priority, roost, power equals 0, flying, status, recovers 50% of HP. Basic moves, peck, power equals 40, flying, physical, astonish, power equals 30, ghost, physical, may cause flinching 30%. Learned moves, pursuit, power equals 40, dark, physical, double damage if the opponent switches, snatch, power equals 0, dark, status, steals the effects of status or healing moves, tailwind, power equals 0, flying, status, increases the team's speed for 4 turns. Trademark moves, none. A series of detailed data appeared before his eyes, fully describing Murkrow's moves and characteristics. Cain's eyes shone with excitement. Detailed data. In his past life, when the system first activated, it was blank. He had to collect information through various means to fill in the data. Cain even accessed Team Rocket's most restricted databases, risking his life multiple times just to obtain crucial information. As a trainer without a prominent background, knowledge was the most important thing. Only with knowledge could one train Pokémon efficiently, allowing them to reach their full potential. Seeing all this detailed information about Murkrow, even someone as used to death as Cain couldn't help but feel excited. Amazingly, the system had brought with it all the data from his previous life. The green color next to Murkrow's name indicated its natural talent. In his past life, Cain had identified that the color represented a Pokémon's potential or quality, with the range going from red to purple. Green was in the middle, which, although not the highest, was still quite rare. Pokémon in nature rarely exceeded the orange quality, and a green talent Pokémon was extremely rare and coveted. With a green talent Murkrow, Cain had reached the 34th position in his previous trial. Surviving on the trial island had been possible thanks to Murkrow's talent, as his skill as a trainer had been minimal. Cain took a deep breath to calm himself. This time, he wouldn't be weak. Weakness is a sin. On this trial island, there was only one law, survival of the fittest. And to be strong, he first needed to improve his Pokémon's power. The first step now was to restore Murkrow's condition. A normal Murkrow measured around half a meter, but this one barely reached 40 centimeters. First, he needed to restore its health to take full advantage of its talent and train it properly. Let's go, Murkrow, let's find something to eat. Cain indicated to Murkrow to perch on his shoulder. Murkrow hesitated for a moment, fearing its weight might hurt the malnourished Cain. But it eventually decided to rest on his shoulder. Feeling the weight on his shoulder and seeing the deep prints it left in the sand, Cain slowly ventured into the forest. As a member of Team Rocket who had risen from the bottom, Cain was an expert in survival techniques. He knew which berries were edible, which were poisonous, which restored energy, and which healed status conditions. After giving Murkrow several ripe Oran berries, Cain bit into a slightly green one. The sour juice slid down his mouth, but he endured the discomfort and slowly chewed the pulp. Although these unripe berries weren't as effective as the ripe ones, they still had some value. Caw! Murkrow, after devouring the berries, looked at the fruit in Cain's hands, a hint of warmth in its eyes. Although it didn't understand why this young man, whom it had just met, gave it the best berries and settled for the worst, it felt a care it hadn't experienced since birth. Murkrow, eat these berries for now. I know you prefer meat, but this is all we have, Cain said, somewhat apologetically. Caw! Murkrow rubbed its beak against Cain's cheek in acceptance. Cain smiled slightly, as images of the Murkrow that had protected him to the end in his past life overlapped with the Murkrow now resting on his shoulder. A feeling of connection slowly settled in his heart. What he had once despised in his past life was now what he valued most. As they walked along a forest path, Cain stopped in front of a dense bush. Based on his experience, these bushes often hid small animals, and sometimes even Pokémon. In this world, although Pokémon exist, there are also normal animals, and carnivorous Pokémon often hunt them as food. Generally, Pokémon are not seen as prey. Whoosh! Just as Cain expected, a grey rabbit darted out of the bush. Looks like this will be our dinner, Cain murmured with a faint smile. Murkrow, use peck. Seeing the food and hearing Cain, Murkrow didn't hesitate. It dove down and stabbed its sharp beak into the rabbit, instantly killing it. Just as Murkrow was about to celebrate, a purple shadow crossed the ground, and the rabbit disappeared. Chapter 3, First Time. When Cain and Murkrow reacted, they saw a small light purple Pokémon standing in front of them, with the wild hair behind it. With an aggressive stance, the small Pokémon seemed to be proclaiming its dominance over the hare. You should know that the small Pokémon had spent a lot of effort driving the hare out of the bushes. However, just as it succeeded, it saw its prey killed by this individual. Fortunately, it was quick enough to snatch it away. Pokémon, Rattata, Red. Gender, Male. Level, 10. Type, Normal. Ability, Run Away. Held item, None. Egg moves, None. Basic moves, Tackle, Tail Whip, Quick Attack, Focus Energy, Bite. Learned moves, None. Trademark moves, None. The Pokémon that appeared before Cain and Murkrow was precisely this Rattata. The quick move it used to snatch the hare was Quick Attack. Caw! Seeing its freshly caught dinner stolen and being threatened, Murkrow naturally did not back down and let out a powerful cry towards Rattata. Its pale yellow beak gleamed with a cold shine. If Cain hadn't been by its side, it probably would have launched an attack right away. A red quality Rattata is one of the most common Pokémon on the island. Although it's 2 levels higher than Murkrow, strength can't be measured solely by level. Since you decided to come out, you'll be Murkrow's first opponent, Cain said with an impassive expression. In reality, when the hare appeared, Cain had already suspected as much. Otherwise, the hare wouldn't have been foolish enough to come out of the bushes and voluntarily become prey. Murkrow, Tailwind. With Cain's order, a gentle breeze surrounded Murkrow, making it feel lighter. The move Tailwind boosts the speed of all allies. Cain showed a small smile. Reality is different from games, there are no turns. As long as you're fast enough, your opponent won't have a chance to react. With a speed stat of 91 and the effect of Tailwind, even a Rattata known for its speed couldn't compare to Murkrow. Peck! Cain's cold voice echoed. The first rule of the jungle is that the strong devour the weak, the strong show no mercy to the weak. A black shadow swept through the forest. The darkness of the night provided an additional layer of cover. Before Rattata could react, the sharp beak had already struck its body with force. Squeak! It cried out in pain. Now, Rattata realized that the dark Pokémon in front of it wasn't something it could take on. It quickly turned, trying to flee. Murkrow, astonish! Knowing that this Rattata had the ability run away, Cain wouldn't let it escape. A piercing sound came from Murkrow, and the Rattata, still reeling from the damage it had received, froze upon hearing the terrifying sound. Naturally cowardly, it didn't know what to do. The move Astonish uses a sudden shout to attack the opponent, with a 30% chance of causing the target to flinch. Of course, in reality, if the moves are chained well, the flinch rate is much higher. And this Rattata was the first to experience it, but it won't be the last. Pursue it, Murkrow, use consecutive pecks. Cain showed no emotion in battle. As long as it's an enemy, no matter how weak it may seem, it should not be underestimated. The second rule of the jungle is to show no mercy to the weak, because you never know what lies behind them. After a second attack, Rattata lost the ability to fight, and Murkrow prepared to retreat. Keep going! But Cain's cold voice rang out once again. The coldness was as if he swallowed a piece of ice, freezing him from within. Murkrow hesitated, looking at Cain and then at the Rattata lying on the ground. A spark of compassion flickered in its eyes, but it quickly extinguished it. Its sharp beak struck again until Rattata completely lost its life. Cain's eyes showed a slight softness, but it quickly disappeared. On this trial island, where everyone devours each other, you cannot show mercy, not even to the weakest enemy. Murkrow didn't disappoint him, although it hesitated. Cain understood, as it was its first time. Only by showing its ferocity here will it be able to firmly establish itself in Team Rocket. And only the red of blood is the most feared color. This is a principle Cain fully understood after many years in his past life. Now, he needed to instill it in his Pokémon. To survive, killing is the right thing to do. Cutting a path through blood. Cain silently collected the hair, while Murkrow flapped its wings twice and perched on his shoulder. They continued into the forest. The bond between human and Pokémon was gradually forming. Kais, Kais. Drops of golden fat dripped from the roasted hare, sizzling in the fire. Although there were no seasonings, the hare's meat was so juicy that even without seasoning, the aroma of the roast slowly spread. Murkrow hopped back and forth on the ground, its eyes fixed on the roasted meat in front of it. It had never smelled such a tempting aroma, and the desire to eat it made it tremble with anxiety. Cain, sitting to the side, looked at the impatient Murkrow and smiled slightly. It's almost ready, don't rush. Before long, the meat was fully cooked. Cain tore off a hind leg and left the rest for Murkrow. The good ecology made the hare larger than expected. For the weakened Cain, eating just the hind leg was enough. A warm current began to flow through his body. Finally, after eating some meat, his weakened body began to regain some strength. Seeing Murkrow devour the hare quickly, Cain exhaled deeply. His weakened body needs a gradual recovery, just like Murkrow, who also needs to recover slowly. If he wants to speed up this process, he'll have to use different herbs and medicinal berries for treatment. System: search for poke blocks that can quickly restore a weakened body and improve a Pokémon's talent, Cain secretly ordered. That's right, poke blocks. One of the Pokémon breeder's skills. As the system's owner, Cain wouldn't miss out on taking advantage of it. In his past life, he was an excellent Pokémon breeder, although he was never officially evaluated by the league. Creating poke blocks was what he was best at. Making poke blocks requires millimeter precision in the ingredients and timing. For an ordinary person, this could only be achieved through experience, and the quality of the poke blocks would vary. However, for Cain, this was a piece of cake. By leaving control to the system, every poke block he produced was practically identical, as if they were cloned. The poke block recipes stored in the system are one of his greatest treasures. As long as he has the necessary ingredients, he can help his Pokémon grow quickly, without wasting an ounce of their potential. Upon giving the command, a series of complete material lists and their effects appeared before his eyes. Chapter 4, Poke Block. Soon, Cain found a recipe. The intermediate poke block, called Yellow Berry Poke Block, has a simple function: to supplement the missing elements in the Pokémon's body, quickly adjusting its physique to recover as much of its natural talent as possible. Cain reviewed the necessary materials, all of which were fairly common fruits and herbs that weren't rare on this resource-rich trial island. Moreover, the manufacturing process was simple, requiring no particularly complex procedures or special tools, making it completely suitable for Cain and Murkrow at this time. To make this Pokeblock, Cain used wood to create a simple set of tools for the Pokeblock's manufacturing process. In short, it was quite basic and not aesthetically pleasing. The next step is to find these materials, as for training, we'll have to postpone that for a bit, Cain thought. First, he needed to help Murkrow recover its body. Although Cain didn't want to waste Murkrow's talent, training and battles would have to be put on hold. However, Cain believed that even without training during this period, he and Murkrow would be able to catch up quickly. 3 days passed quickly. During these 3 days, Cain and Murkrow wandered around the forest looking for fruits and herbs. The time it took slightly exceeded Cain's expectations, but it wasn't too late. Holding the freshly made yellow berry Pokeblock in his hand, a slight coolness spread from his palm. Under the sunlight, he could clearly see a substance resembling fruit pulp, with a pale yellow surface that was extremely smooth, and a faint aroma emanated from it. For Cain, making the Pokeblock wasn't difficult, and the process went smoothly. The finished Pokeblock was just as he had imagined. This recipe was one he had stumbled upon in his previous life, and he had never used it before. All he could do was hope the effect would be good. With a slight flick of his fingers, he tossed the Pokeblock into the air. Murkrow, who had been intently eyeing the Pokeblock, shot off Cain's shoulder like a bullet and caught it in its beak. Murkrow, unable to hold back its desire to eat, was captivated by the aroma of the Pokeblock. Cain watched Murkrow excitedly and nodded with a smile. After receiving Cain's approval, Murkrow devoured the Pokeblock. Caw! A flavor it had never experienced before filled Murkrow's mouth. It opened its beak, squinted its eyes in pleasure, and let out a sound of satisfaction. Murkrow's expression of enjoyment indicated that the Pokeblock tasted delicious. Seems like it tastes good, Cain smiled slightly. The intermediate yellow berry Pokeblock can only be consumed 10 times a day, after 10, the effect will fade. The recipe says that if consumed for 7 days, it should restore the damaged body of the Pokémon. Looking at the nearly 100 Pokeblocks he had, Cain kept 9 and carefully wrapped the rest in a cloth bag he had prepared in advance, which he hung from his waist. He tossed the Pokeblocks in his hand one by one, and all were swiftly caught and eaten by Murkrow. Although the effects wouldn't be immediate, Cain could see the difference in Murkrow before and after through the system. Even the green of its name had become slightly more intense. For better absorption, Murkrow, we'll start training. Are you ready to get stronger? Cain said as he tossed the last Pokeblock. Caw! Murkrow responded with an enthusiastic cry. Cain was well versed in training and forming Murkrow. Murkrow was very fast, and if he didn't use its highest speed stat, he wouldn't even forgive himself. Moreover, Murkrow had a hidden ability, Prankster. Prankster allows status moves to be used first. It's an artifact for gaining the upper hand. Murkrow, use Tailwind. A gentle breeze appeared around Murkrow. Tailwind is a status move that can increase the speed of all allies. Murkrow felt as if it had unlimited energy inside. The freshly consumed Pokeblock turned into a stream of heat that flowed through its limbs, becoming a constant source of strength emerging from its body. Soon, the duration of Tailwind ended, and the breeze gradually disappeared. Keep the Tailwind around you. Try to prolong its duration, Cain ordered again. Tailwind can increase the speed of everyone, but if kept only around Murkrow, it will only increase its speed and reduce energy consumption, allowing for a longer duration, which could potentially allow Murkrow to increase its speed permanently. Although Murkrow didn't understand why Cain was organizing the training this way, it began to focus the airflow around itself, striving to maintain it as long as possible. Caw! After a minute, the airflow around Murkrow completely dissipated, as if it had used all its strength, and its cry had a hint of panting. Remember this state. Our goal is to keep Tailwind always around you. Alright, do it again. During training, Cain seemed to transform into a strict instructor, expressionless and very serious. Continue, Tailwind. Continue, Tailwind. Continue. Continue. After beginning the training, Cain became a severe instructor. With the system, he could clearly know Murkrow's training limits, avoiding overtraining that could damage its body and ensuring the training was effective. After another 3 days, Cain had trained Murkrow for a full 3 days, and finally, it managed to maintain the state of Tailwind from 1 minute to 10 minutes. Murkrow also managed to use Tailwind on his shoulder without affecting Cain, aiming to achieve their goal as soon as possible. By Cain's nature, he would have trained in the forest until the final trial began. But Team Rocket had a rule: every week, you had to report to the base, no matter the situation. Failure to do so would result in point deductions, and accumulating too few points would lead to direct elimination. In the plaza, which used to be filled with 300 people, there were now only a few scattered groups, their gazes filled with caution and hostility. Everyone present knew very well what failing the trial meant. Therefore, every person here was an enemy. Cain sneered at the small groups huddling together. Grouping up might be a good way to survive, but it depends on the situation. When life is on the line, who cares about others? So grouping up is just a way for the strong to gather some subordinates to do the dirty work for them. As for the trial's final outcome, if you're strong enough, who would dare oppose you? A common feature among everyone present was that each had a Pokémon by their side. Most were Zubat, with a few accompanied by Acans and Coughing, and some, like Cain, had other Pokémon. Counting, there were about 3 Murkrow. Compared to the ferocity of Acans and the danger of Coughing, Zubat was a relatively easy Pokémon to tame. For young people without strength, taming a wild Pokémon was already valuable, and those who could tame Acans and Coughing were no weaklings. After a week of jungle life, the polarization between them became more apparent. The strong grew stronger, and the weak weaker. After 3 days of training, although there hadn't been many battles, Murkrow's level had reached level 10. Even so, Cain remained insignificant compared to the others. And due to the days of nourishment, Cain's face, which had been pale and thin, gradually started to show some color. He quietly approached a corner of the plaza, crossed his arms, leaned against a stone pillar, and closed his eyes to rest. Chapter 5, Instructor Viper. It wasn't long before the noisy plaza fell silent. A middle-aged man with a fierce expression, standing nearly 2 meters tall, entered the plaza wearing a military hat. On the most visible part of his left chest, a red R could be seen. Behind him followed 10 Team Rocket members, all dressed in soldier uniforms with cold expressions, accompanied by large wolf-like dogs. Walking beside the middle-aged man was a sinister dog, entirely black, with 2 white horns curving backward on its head and a tail resembling that of a demon. It was a Houndoom, a dark and fire-type Pokémon. Cain listened as the plaza grew quiet and slowly opened his eyes. Seeing the middle-aged man, his eyes narrowed slightly. It was him. He cast a glance at the Houndoom next to the man, and a glint passed through his eyes as the system activated. Pokémon, Houndoom, green. Gender, male. Level, 28. Types, dark, fire. Ability, flash fire. Held item, none. Egg moves, fire fang, fire spin. Basic moves, will-o-wisp, foul play, thunder fang, leer, ember, howl, haze, roar, bite, odor sleuth, smog. Learned moves, feint attack. Trademark moves, hidden power, rock, shadow ball, flamethrower. Seeing Houndoom's level and the long list of moves, Cain couldn't help but feel a bit helpless. The difference was significant. Furthermore, he knew that this Houndoom didn't even belong to the man's primary team. It was possible that it wasn't even on his secondary team. If the man brought out any Pokémon from his second team, he could defeat everyone present, including all the Team Rocket members. This time, there are even 156 survivors. The quality of this group isn't bad, the middle-aged man said. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone in the plaza could hear him. He spoke as if he weren't talking about human lives. The man looked around the plaza, and noticing that everyone was staring at him, he calmly said, "My name is Viper, I'm the lead instructor of Team Rocket, responsible for this purgatory you call an island. From today on, your lives belong to me." He smiled sadistically as he observed how everyone was intimidated by his presence and nodded in satisfaction. "The trial will last 3 months. From now on, you must gather here once a week. If you miss 2 consecutive times, it will be considered a failure. I'm sure you already know the consequences of failing, right?" Viper continued speaking on his own. He pointed to a large rock in the center of the plaza and said, "This is the test stone, a device developed with Team Rocket's latest technology. It can measure the strength of a Pokémon's attack. Next, you will take turns attacking this stone. Based on the data obtained, you will be ranked. The top 10 in the ranking will receive 100 points, with progressive increases. As for what you can get with those points, you can investigate on your own. Team Rocket points. They are a resource that can only be used within Team Rocket, allowing you to obtain almost anything in the world. It's thanks to this point system that Team Rocket has reached its current level. It's well known that in this world, large families control scarce resources, and even if you have a lot of money, you couldn't buy them. These points can be used not only on the island but also at any Team Rocket base after the trial is over. The maximum number of people who can pass this trial will be 50. The top 10 will each receive 10,000 points. The top 3 will obtain a fake league identity card, created by Team Rocket. And the first place winner will be able to choose one of the high-quality starter Pokémon from Team Rocket's storage, Viper said word by word. And most importantly, the rule of this trial is, there are no rules. Let the first ranking test begin. With that order, Viper sat down on a chair in the center of the plaza and gave his subordinates the signal to start recording the entire process. Under the active direction of the Team Rocket soldiers, everyone quickly formed a line for the first ranking test. Icans, bite! A young man's voice rang out, and a purple snake shadow rushed toward the large rock in the center, opening a bloody mouth with 2 sharp fangs gleaming with white light, biting hard on the stone. Bang! But it didn't leave a single scratch. Attack value, 56. Immediately, a line of text appeared on the test stone. A Team Rocket soldier recording the results shouted emotionlessly, number 34, attack value 56. Currently first. Next. Then he noted the result in his notebook. The young man with number 34 on his chest didn't seem satisfied with his result, frowned, and walked away. Next in line was a young man with a Zubat, looking scared and somewhat inexperienced. Zubat, tackle! He ordered with a youthful voice, while the Zubat above his head slowly flapped its wings and collided back first into the stone. Attack value, 19. Seeing the result on the test stone, the first young man breathed a sigh of relief, then made a dismissive gesture, while the others in line looked at the young man with a mix of contempt. Number 13, attack value 19, currently second. Next. The Team Rocket soldier remained emotionless. To him, these boys and girls facing Pokémon for the first time were so inexperienced they failed to capture his interest. Number 24, attack value 25, currently second. Next. Number 98, attack value 45. Number 77, attack value. One after another, those with better results looked down disdainfully at those below them, while those with worse results gazed enviously and with frustration at those above. Cain watched the situation, frowning. In his past life, it had been the same. An elite selection trial for Team Rocket. Only when participants begin to fight among themselves can the strongest emerge. Attack value, 98. While Cain was thinking, a murmur of astonishment spread through the crowd. A young man with a slender build, white skin, and impeccable clothing stood at the front with an attack value of 98, the highest so far. Beside him, an Ican stood proudly, looking at everyone with disdain. It's him. When Cain saw him, his eyes involuntarily narrowed. If he remembered correctly, that young man was the one who secured first place in this trial and received an exceptional Bulbasaur, beginning a meteoric rise. Even when Cain activated the system, he never managed to catch up to him. Number 99. His real name was Xander. A long time passed without anyone managing to surpass Xander's attack value. When the test was almost finished, it was finally Cain's turn, number 234. Another one with a special Pokémon. When Cain's turn arrived, many began murmuring as they noticed the Murkrow on his shoulder. The Pokémon assigned by Team Rocket were mainly Zubat, Icans, and Coughing, but there were also some different Pokémon. A special Pokémon wasn't necessarily stronger than a Zubat, Icans, or Coughing, it was just seen as something different, an outsider. Bah, it's just a Murkrow, what's so special about that? The Murkrow from before didn't do that well either, and this one looks even weaker. I bet he won't accomplish much, someone said disdainfully. Cain showed no emotion, ignored the others' words, took a deep breath, and ordered, Tailwind and then Peck. His calmness silenced those who had ridiculed him, feeling slightly embarrassed. They had tried to throw him off with words, but only ended up looking foolish. Murkrow took flight, surrounded by a white airflow. After a few days of recovery, its body had returned to the normal size of a Murkrow. Murkrow circled in the air, gathering strength and, using the momentum of tailwind and gravity, struck the stone with a powerful hit. Then, with an elegant turn, it landed lightly on Cain's shoulder. Cain smiled slightly, opened his eyes a bit, raised his eyebrows, glanced at the stone, and walked away calmly. Attack value, 97. The words on the stone felt like a slap in the face to everyone who had ridiculed him. An attack value of 97, only 1 point below Xander's 98. Currently second, while the third had an attack value of only 90, a considerable difference. Number 234, attack value 97, currently second. Next. Even the soldier recording the results glanced at Cain, who was walking slowly through the crowd, and after a moment, finally announced the result. In reality, Cain's Murkrow didn't have the strength to deliver such a powerful attack, but Cain had used a trick for Murkrow to take advantage of Tailwind's momentum and gravity while descending, achieving that result. After Cain's test, several other participants, who were more astute, began reflecting. They understood that Cain had used a trick. A simple trick, but effective, right? As stated before, the rule is, there are no rules. Viper had watched the entire testing process, and when Cain finished, his eyes lingered on him for a few extra seconds. An interesting boy. Chapter 6, The Exchange Center. Since then, there hadn't been any higher scores than Cain's, but thanks to Cain's trick, many managed to improve their skills, resulting in an overall increase in scores. Throughout the whole process, the only one who showed disdain was Xander. He didn't use any tricks, his score was legitimate, and so he considered everyone there to be trash. Even Cain, who had only surpassed his score by 1 point, was nothing more than a lucky person who knew a few tricks. The final results were as follows. First place, number 99, attack value, 98. Second place, number 234, attack value, 97. Third place, number 67, attack value, 95. Fourth place, number 156, attack value, 93. Fifth place, number 279, attack value, 90. According to Viper, the top 10 would each receive 100 points, regardless of whether they came first or second. Once the rankings were announced, everyone received a belt with the Team Rocket R emblem. Inside, there was an ID card with each person's number, where their points would be stored. The belt also had a very useful function, 1 cubic meter of storage space. Ignoring those who tried to stop him, Cain headed straight to the exchange center with his Murkrow. Having been a member of Team Rocket once before, he knew how valuable the items that could be exchanged for points were. There were many things he needed, but they could only be obtained with points. However, since he didn't have many points, the things he needed most weren't that expensive. Cain had already planned out what he wanted to exchange. Looking at the points list in front of him, even though he knew the prices, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. A young Dratini, 1 million points. A young Larvitar, 1 million points. It was possible to exchange for even the rarest Pokémon, but those prices were unreachable for Cain. With only 100 points, Cain passed over the most desirable and unattainable items and moved on to what he could actually exchange for. He began browsing the list from the back to the front until he reached the section for tools and items. Ignoring the incredulous look of the shopkeeper, he exchanged for one of each available berry. These berries were very common, and most people wouldn't bother with them, but to Cain, they were incredibly valuable. They not only saved him a lot of time searching but could also be used to make Pokeblocks, which would improve his Murkrow's growth. He filled the entire cubic meter of space in his Team Rocket belt with all the available berries, which cost him only 80 points. He then spent 5 more points on some everyday items and outdoor supplies. After swiping his card to redeem his points, just as Cain was about to leave, he saw a familiar figure entering the exchange center, Xander and his Ekans. As he walked past, Cain silently activated the scan system. Pokémon, Ekans, green. Gender, male. Level, 14. Type, poison. Ability, intimidate. Held item, none. Egg moves, pursuit, poison fang, scary face. Basic moves, wrap, leer, poison sting, bite, glare. Learned moves, snatch. Trademark moves, none. Cain was surprised to see that Xander's Ekans had a green rating. No wonder Xander had secured first place in his past life. During this classification test, Cain had also scanned quickly and noticed that there were no more than 5 Pokémon with green talent, and none with a higher talent. Although he hadn't been able to scan everyone due to the distance, no other green-rated Pokémon were as strong as that Ekans. It's known that Ekans is a difficult Pokémon to tame due to its wild nature. Moreover, this green talent Ekans with the Intimidate ability could only be tamed by someone extraordinary. So, it wasn't surprising that Xander had achieved first place in his past life. Hey, you're the second place, right? Xander suddenly stopped and said. Cain kept walking without turning around. Seeing that Cain ignored him, Xander's face darkened. He gave the order to attack. Ekans, go. Poison Sting. At that moment, Xander was still lacking in cunning. Despite his youth and inexperience on the test island, he was naturally proud. Upon hearing the order, Ekans opened its bloody mouth and launched several poisonous needles toward Cain's back. Though Cain didn't turn around, he had been paying attention to Xander's movements. Idiot! Murkrow, reinforce Tailwind and deflect the poison needles. As Ekans initiated the attack, Cain was already prepared and gave the order in time. Murkrow, having mastered the Tailwind move, instantly increased the wind's force, almost reaching the power of Whirlwind. With a strong flap of its wings, Murkrow formed 2 small whirlwinds with flying-type energy, deflecting the poison needles. Cain turned around and looked at Xander. His eyes gleamed with a dangerous glint, waiting for his opponent's next move. At that moment, Cain wasn't entirely sure he could win. To his surprise, Xander smiled and said, "Not bad, you're better than I thought." After saying that, he ignored Cain and headed toward the exchange counter. Cain frowned as he watched Xander's back, suppressing his desire to attack. After a moment, he signaled his Murkrow to lower its guard. Then, accompanied by his Murkrow, Cain left the exchange center and headed straight into the forest without looking back. In the center of the base, in the large office of Team Rocket's chief instructor, Viper was sitting at his desk. In front of him stood a figure draped in a black cloak. 2 cups of tea sat between them, with hot steam rising slowly, dissipating into the air. After a moment of silence, Viper was the first to speak. "What brings you here again? What do you need?" His tone was a mix of mockery and curiosity. Beneath the black cloak, a pair of eyes hardened by time peeked out. The figure adjusted slightly before speaking in a hoarse voice, "The mission failed. I need some people to reinforce my team." From the voice, it was impossible to determine the person's age. Viper smiled, taking a sip of tea before replying slowly, "The mission failed." The mockery in his voice and eyes was unmistakable. "Who would have thought, the famous you, failing a mission? Have you now reached the point of asking me for people? Isn't there anyone in Team Rocket you find good enough?" Ignoring Viper's sarcastic tone, the hoarse voice from the cloak spoke again, "I fell into an alliance trap. 2 elite-level trainers showed up, I was almost caught." His tone was as calm as if he were discussing anything. "Oh." Viper's expression turned serious as he straightened in his seat. "Were they acting openly? Or was it covered? How did you escape?" Viper fired off a series of questions. Elite-level trainers were powerful in Viper's eyes, and the fact that the Alliance had sent 2 of them at the same time meant something bigger was at play. It could be a move against Team Rocket in general, or perhaps just a targeted attack. In the dark room, the candle light flickered, casting shadows that danced along with the flames. After a brief silence, the cloaked figure raised a hand. From beneath the black cloak, a shriveled, withered left hand emerged. When Viper saw the dried-up, wrinkled hand, his eyes narrowed. The 2 were clearly acquainted, and Viper was well aware of the man's condition under the cloak. Though he wasn't young, that withered hand didn't match his age, and the most striking feature was that 3 fingers were missing, leaving only the thumb and index finger. A poison-type elite trainer. Though Viper phrased it as a question, his tone was certain. Only a poison-type move could cause such damage, and the only one who could gravely injure someone of elite level was another at the same level. The head under the cloak gave an imperceptible nod. The raspy voice, which had been calm until now, turned slightly colder. "A poison-type elite trainer, along with a psychic-type elite trainer. Neither of them is a public figure of the Alliance. If I hadn't reacted quickly and cut off 3 fingers, I would have lost my whole hand." The man under the cloak took a deep breath to calm himself before continuing. "Thanks to 3 of my Pokémon distracting them, I was able to escape. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here now, although the mission has failed. Chapter 7, Leaving the Base. Viper nodded seriously. The League had sent 2 powerful elite-level trainers, and one of them was an advanced elite, something rare. This indicated that the League had considerable knowledge about the mission in question, otherwise, they would not have deployed such an impressive force. Viper frowned even more as he pondered the situation, which now seemed more complicated than he had imagined. What about the leader? The leader is already aware. I'm not concerned about who leaked the information. What I need now is a couple of people to help me with some minor tasks. After all, I've lost a considerable amount of power and need time to recover, replied the mysterious hooded man as he withdrew his left hand, speaking indifferently. Viper relaxed his frown a little. If he only needed a few people, that wouldn't be a problem. Do you want to wait until the trial is over, or do you need them now? Asked Viper, although he couldn't help but smile. The youths undergoing the trial at that moment were of little use, they weren't even at the level of a rocket grunt. After the trial ends, I'll choose a few. For now, I just need you to prepare a room for me to recover, replied the hooded man, without offering further explanations. He hadn't directly chosen members of his former unit because, first, he didn't know who in Team Rocket could be trusted or who might be infiltrators from the League. And second, he preferred to work with inexperienced people and mold them as he saw fit. Once his subordinates escorted the hooded man out of the room, Viper stared at the candle flame on the table, clasping his hands together as he sank into thought. Meanwhile, Cain, accompanied by his Murkrow, was walking alone deeper into the forest. This time, he didn't plan to stay long near the forest's edge. Not only because the nearby Pokémon were of low level, which wouldn't help train Murkrow, but also because Cain wanted to find a quiet place to camp and focus on making poke blocks. As he advanced, the forest paths became increasingly blurred, surrounded by thicker undergrowth and dense bushes. Cain stored the poke blocks he had prepared with yellow berries in the storage space of his Team Rocket belt. He then tied a strip of cloth around his head to protect his face from thorns and branches. Murkrow, resting on Cain's shoulder, kept using the tailwind move, keeping it activated at all times. At the same time, it controlled some air currents to clear away branches and undergrowth, making it easier for Cain to move forward. If they encountered thicker branches, Murkrow flapped its wings, using a rudimentary attempt at the whirlwind move to push them aside, which also served as an exercise for its flying-type energy. Murkrow, when you use flying-type energy, you need to be aware of how much you use. Since endurance is your weak point, if you can save energy, you shouldn't waste it, Cain said, giving instructions as they moved forward. Also, remember that you're a dark and flying-type Pokémon. Once we find a suitable place, we'll start training your dark-type moves, Cain added, smiling as he saw Murkrow growing more excited. Caw! Murkrow nodded vigorously, understanding Cain's words. Murkrow also wanted to become stronger and had a great desire to fight. With a flap of its wings, Murkrow generated 2 small gusts of wind. Cain felt satisfied seeing Murkrow's desire to become stronger. For a trainer, having a high-talent Pokémon isn't enough. If the Pokémon lacks the will to fight or improve, that talent isn't worth much. On the other hand, a Pokémon with the will to fight, even with lesser talent, can go much further. Murkrow not only had good talent, but it was also developing great synchronization with Cain. If it also had a strong desire to improve, there was no doubt that the two of them would have a bright future. Cain hadn't gone far when his thoughts were interrupted. A wild, robust Spearow flew directly from a nearby tree, with a fierce, murderous look. Its sharp beak and gleaming claws clearly showed its intent to kill. On this island, Pokémon had no sympathy for humans. Seeing Cain's thin figure, this Spearow saw him as easy prey. Additionally, Spearow is known to be an especially aggressive Pokémon. However, this surprise attack was just a routine encounter for Cain. With a slight movement, he dodged Spearow's attack by a narrow margin. In this world, Pokémon directly attack humans, and it's not unusual. Powerful Pokémon can cause sudden and lethal damage to humans. Moreover, in this world, some people control Pokémon to directly attack other humans. Team Rocket is one such group. For them, the mission is all that matters, with no concern for justice. Even within the League, there are those who follow that philosophy. Thus, having risen to become a Team Rocket officer and a quasi-elite expert, Cain had faced situations like this countless times. Spearow's attack was routine for him. After easily dodging Spearow's attack, Cain gave an order to Murkrow, Murkrow used Tailwind and Feint Attack. Murkrow flew swiftly. It had no sympathy for the Spearow that had attacked and almost hurt Cain. In fact, it felt deeply humiliated. If not for Cain's quick reaction, it might have been injured, and that was a direct challenge to Murkrow as Cain's Pokémon. A black shadow flew past, and with the effect of the Tailwind move, Murkrow's Feint Attack hit Spearow directly. Screech! Spearow cried out in pain as it was knocked down. At that moment, Cain quickly scanned Spearow. Pokémon, Spearow, Orange. Gender, Male. Level, 12. Type, Normal, Flying. Ability, Keen Eye. Held item, none. Egg moves, none. Basic moves, Peck, Growl, Leer, Pursuit, Fury Attack. Learned moves, none. Trademark moves, none. An orange rank Spearow, not a bad wild Pokémon, Cain thought to himself. Don't stop, Murkrow. Use Peck, Cain ordered calmly. Murkrow was already in motion before Cain finished speaking. In fact, it didn't even need Cain to say it, it was ready to continue its attack. The Spearow, still dazed from the previous attack, had no time to react before Murkrow struck again. As a fragile Pokémon, Spearow couldn't withstand the continuous attacks and paid the price for having attacked Cain. Ignoring the fallen Spearow, Cain adjusted his posture and continued deeper into the forest. Spearow typically lived in groups, and Cain didn't want to face an entire flock at that moment. Besides, he knew the Pokémon he would encounter ahead would be stronger, and he didn't want to waste unnecessary energy on the way. His goal that day was to find a suitable place to camp. Thanks to his experience with forest life, Cain was able to avoid encounters with more powerful Pokémon and use animal trails to identify the species present. After quickly defeating several Pokémon that attacked him and moving away quickly from the scene, Cain and Murkrow finally found a satisfactory spot after about 3 hours of walking. It was a small lake, surrounded by dense trees. To the west of the lake, there was a small hill with a cave clearly dug out by a Pokémon. This is the place, Cain said with satisfaction. Chapter 8, The Zubat Cave. The gradually setting sun hung in the sky, and its faint rays scattered across the surface of the lake. A light breeze blew, creating shimmering ripples on the water. Cain, accompanied by Murkrow, slowly walked toward the edge of the cave. Unconsciously, the air began to smell foul. Cain frowned, and even Murkrow instinctively used its wings to cover its mouth, as if the stench in the air was unpleasant. The closer they got to the cave, the lighter Cain's steps became. Upon reaching the entrance, despite the intense odor, both he and Murkrow began to get used to it. Frowning as he stared into the completely dark cave, it was clear that this wasn't a natural formation. Even the nearby rocks bore numerous claw marks. Judging by the marks, it looks like this cave has been dug out for a long time. I just hope there aren't any overly powerful Pokémon inside, Cain muttered. The Murkrow on his shoulder also gradually focused, its muscles tensing, and the air currents around it signaling it was ready. Seeing Murkrow's tension, Cain smiled faintly and reassured it, "Don't worry, Murkrow. Let's first see what's inside." Murkrow relaxed slightly but remained alert. Cain picked up a stone from the ground, tested its weight, nodded, and then threw it forcefully into the cave. Thud! 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 After a few noises, everything went silent. A few moments later, a hissing sound came from within the cave, followed by a flurry of wings. Hearing this, Cain relaxed a little. As long as it wasn't an Ursaring, he was confident Murkrow could handle it. A group of Zubat flew out of the cave, clearly furious about their sleep being disturbed. Like regular bats, wild Zubat sleep during the day and hunt at night. Being interrupted now was like waking someone from a deep sleep. Among the group of Zubat, one was noticeably larger than the rest, clearly the leader. The Zubat leader, upon seeing that the intruder was just a human with a small Pokémon, growled at a few nearby Zubat and then led the rest back into the cave to continue sleeping. Observing the Zubat's reaction, Cain was slightly surprised. Despite facing over 10 Zubat, which would normally force him to retreat, the leader's disdain significantly reduced the pressure. 4 Zubat opened their mouths, baring their fangs, and after a few flaps, lunged toward Cain and Murkrow. Just 4 Zubat with red quality, the strongest barely level 10, Cain muttered with a smile. He had already scanned their data with the system as soon as they appeared. Murkrow instinctively took flight. After 2 days of training and unlocking its potential, it was beginning to enjoy battles, turning into a whirlwind that flew between its enemies, toying with them. Murkrow used Tailwind and then Astonish. Air currents quickly surrounded Murkrow, transforming it into a black shadow clearly visible in the setting sun. It opened its mouth and let out an ear-splitting shriek that created shockwaves in the air. Two of the Zubat, caught by the sound, froze in terror. Though not paralyzed, their speed slowed. The other two merely shook their heads, somewhat annoyed by the noise. Zubat usually have the ability Inner Focus, which prevents them from being flinched, but with their sensitive ears, the screech caused them significant discomfort. Additionally, since they use echolocation to navigate, the noise affected their movement. The two Zubat glanced at each other and then opened their mouths, releasing inaudible sound waves that move supersonic. Murkrow, maintain speed and finish them off, Cain ordered, enduring the interference from the supersonic attack. The air currents around Murkrow intensified, and in an instant, it reached the two Zubat. Use Peck. Before they could react, two strong pecks in quick succession knocked both Zubat down. Murkrow, in its high-speed state, used the same trick from earlier in the day, combining momentum with its move to take them out instantly. At that moment, the two Zubat most affected by Astonish also recovered. Noticing their fallen companions, they displayed fear, flapping uncertainly as they debated whether to attack or retreat. With narrowed eyes and a slight smile, Cain didn't hesitate. Murkrow, use Punishment and finish them off at once. Punishment, a Dark-type move, had high priority thanks to Murkrow's Prankster ability. Additionally, with the boost from Tailwind, a black shadow streaked through the Zubat, leaving them unconscious on the ground. Cain nodded, satisfied with Murkrow's performance. Though not yet at its peak, Murkrow's Prankster ability made it exceptional. With status moves, its speed was impressive, and combined with Tailwind, it became even more powerful. Murkrow, with its green quality, outclassed the Zubat in talent, and with its move combinations, it was no surprise it defeated them quickly. Using the same tactic, Cain exploited the Zubat leader's arrogance to eliminate the rest, leaving only the furious leader. Pokémon, Zubat, Yellow. Gender, Male. Level, 12. Type, Poison, Flying. Ability, Keen Eye. Held item, None. Egg moves, Quick Attack. Basic moves, Absorb, Supersonic, Astonish, Bite. Learned moves, Wing Attack. Trademark moves, None. This wild Pokémon with yellow quality was the first Cain had seen. If he had spare Pokeballs, he'd capture it without hesitation, either to use or trade for resources. Murkrow, exhausted from battle, flapped its wings slower, and the tailwind currents weakened. Noticing Murkrow's condition, Cain frowned. It was too much to ask of it. But seeing the Zubat on the verge of fury, there was no other choice. Cain considered giving Murkrow a break, but seeing the sun about to set, he dismissed the idea. Zubat are more active at night, and although the darkness wouldn't affect Murkrow, it would hinder Cain's ability to give commands. So, the best course of action was to take down this yellow-quality Zubat before nightfall and claim the cave. In the forest, nightfall is dangerous, and the deeper one goes, the more dangers lurk around every corner. Chapter 9, Battle against the Zubat leader. Murkrow, hang in there a little longer. Keep the tailwind up. Cain watched his exhausted Murkrow and encouraged him. Caw! Murkrow screeched with determination in the air. Today's battle had him incredibly excited. Although his body was tired, facing the Zubat leader, clearly stronger than the previous ones, filled him with an unprecedented joy. Cain smiled slightly at seeing Murkrow's enthusiasm. His Pokémon's fighting spirit made him feel very satisfied. Kai Kai! The Zubat leader screeched angrily. This Pokémon and his trainer in front of him had turned his band into a bunch of weak followers. The Zubat leader, with relatively high intelligence, clearly noticed that the weak human in front of him wasn't a major physical threat. The setting sun made him feel stronger, and his energy increased. With a sharp flap of his wings, the Zubat leader emitted a bloody stench from his mouth, as dark energy swirled around his sharp fangs. Dark-type attack, Bite. Seeing that the Zubat leader's target was Cain, Murkrow quickly reacted, using the last of his tailwind boost to intercept. The more dangerous the situation, the calmer Cain remained. He had faced death before, and now he could approach any situation with a cool mind. Murkrow, use Feint Attack. Turning into a black bullet, Murkrow violently charged at the Zubat leader. Bang! After the collision, both figures were sent flying backward, sustaining almost equal injuries. After a brief pause, they faced off again. Without the tailwind boost, Murkrow's speed was no longer as high, but he was still slightly faster than the Zubat leader. Although the Zubat leader tried to attack Cain, Murkrow kept him firmly at bay. However, as night fell, the Zubat leader grew more vigorous, while Murkrow's energy began to dwindle. Finally, after another clash, Murkrow couldn't get up right away. The Zubat leader's wings trembled slightly, while his invisible supersonic waves continued to scan the surroundings. As if he had sensed something delicious, the exhausted Zubat leader needed blood to replenish himself. He launched at Cain again, his fangs covered in a reddish glow. Absorb. Caw. Murkrow, seeing the Zubat's attack, tried to rise, supporting himself on his wings, but his chest heaved up and down weakly, as if his body no longer responded to him. Once again feeling his own weakness, Murkrow grew angry at himself for being unable to protect his trainer, something he considered the greatest humiliation. But when Cain saw the Zubat's attack, he flashed a strange smile. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Murkrow, hold on a little longer and use Snatch. Cain shouted, noticing out of the corner of his eye that Murkrow was getting back up. Cra! Upon hearing Cain's command, Murkrow gathered all his strength, flapping his trembling wings. The Zubat leader's fangs sank into Murkrow's body as he positioned himself between the Zubat and Cain. The Zubat was briefly surprised but then relaxed. After all, blood is blood. However, when he expected to savor it, he didn't feel the familiar flow of energy. It was like wanting ice cream on a hot summer day, having it right in front of you, imagining the refreshing taste, only to bite into air. The Zubat leader was shocked that he didn't receive the blood he expected. Not only did he fail to recover energy, but he also felt his strength drain away. On the other hand, Murkrow felt a warm surge course through his body, revitalizing him. When the Zubat leader realized this and tried to pull back, his wings faltered, and weakness overtook him. Snatch, a dark-type move, under Murkrow's prankster ability, activated before the Zubat leader's Absorb, stealing its recovery effect. Murkrow, use Roost. Taking advantage of the Zubat leader's weakness, Cain quickly ordered Murkrow to recover. Roost is a flying-type move that allows a Pokémon to restore half of its energy when it lands. Murkrow quickly landed in front of Cain. Feeling the strength of the ground beneath his feet, a warm energy flowed through his body, and he slowly felt his strength returning. Watching Murkrow recover, Cain said, use Tailwind again, then finish him off with Peck. When the Zubat leader reacted, all he saw was Murkrow in front of him, with a shining beak reflecting the moonlight, relentlessly pecking at him. With each strike, more wounds appeared, and the Zubat leader's energy quickly drained away. With a series of pecks, Murkrow finished off the Zubat leader once and for all. Caw! Murkrow cried out with renewed energy, feeling that his wings were stronger, his claws sharper, and his beak brighter, so much so that he could see the moon's reflection on it. In Cain's eyes, Murkrow had leveled up from 10 to 11. Although it was just one level, the growth was evident. In the real world, every level a Pokémon rises represents a true advancement. After his triumphant cry, Murkrow staggered and fell from the sky, just in time to be caught by Cain. This was the consequence of repeatedly using Roost. Cain had prevented Murkrow from using the move before because, although Roost allows for quick recovery, it depends on an advance energy expenditure. If overused, this move could result in a permanent decrease in energy, or even in a regression of level and quality. Luckily, Cain had experience as a breeder and could create suitable poke blocks to counter these effects, as long as Murkrow didn't overuse the move. Even so, a period of weakness was inevitable, which is why Cain preferred to reserve Roost as a last resort. With the exhausted Murkrow in his arms, Cain entered the Zubat cave under the moonlight. Enduring the familiar stench and stepping through the mud of Zubat droppings, Cain reached the back of the cave. In the faint moonlight, he could see claw marks on the walls, indicating that the Zubat weren't the original inhabitants of the cave. The former owner had long since departed, allowing the Zubat colony to take over. After walking about 10 meters, Cain reached a drier area, where the moonlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling. Unlike the darkness in other parts of the cave, here not everything was completely black. Finding a dry rock, Cain sat down with Murkrow on his lap, prepared to spend the night there. Murkrow, slowly recovering, jumped off Cain's lap and rubbed his beak against Cain's hand, feeling the warmth emanating from his trainer. It gave him a deep sense of peace. Sometimes, Pokémon are that simple, as long as they are with their favorite trainer, whether in rain or wind, they will remain the most loyal companions and friends. Chapter 10, Making Poke Blocks. Leaving Murkrow to rest on the side, Cain began to think about the plan for the next few days. First, what will not change is that Murkrow will continue eating yellow berry poke blocks. Based on the usage of the past few days, the effect has been quite good. Just from appearance alone, in these 4 days, Murkrow has grown from a state of obvious malnutrition to the normal size of a Murkrow, with a height close to 50 centimeters. However, in Cain's eyes, the change in Murkrow is not just that. Physical growth is the most apparent, and thanks to the system's daily precise scans, both Murkrow's strength and speed have improved to various degrees. Even its talent and quality have increased. Although it is still in the green state, the green color is noticeably darker than a few days ago, indicating that Murkrow's original quality is among the best within green quality Pokémon. Especially after the consecutive battles this afternoon, Murkrow's efficiency in absorbing the yellow berry poke blocks has also improved. There are 3 more days left, and Cain believes that if he continues using the poke blocks, Murkrow's original quality will fully recover, and then its growth will accelerate. Therefore, training during these days must not stop. It is best to seek battles with different Pokémon so that Murkrow becomes familiar with the battle rhythm and can better absorb the effects of the poke blocks and recover more completely. As for the direction of Murkrow's training, speed remains the priority. The duration of the move Tailwind should continue to be trained. Additionally, Murkrow needs to master some essential moves. The moves it has already learned require time to be familiarized and perfected so that they can be executed more efficiently in battle. As a dark and flying type Pokémon, Murkrow has good resistance. It does not suffer from quadruple damage, so it will not be easily countered by Pokémon of a specific type. Even attacks that deal double damage, such as electric, ice, or fairy type attacks, are very rare on the trial island or even non-existent. So, while fighting on this island, only rock type attacks need to be watched out for. With the Prankster ability, Murkrow has an advantage when using moves, especially when combined with Tailwind. What Cain needs to do now is engage in more battles to improve the coordination between trainer and Pokémon and perfect the combat techniques they already know. After using the yellow berry poke blocks, Murkrow will need another type of poke block to accelerate its growth and enhance its training effects. And Cain has already thought of a new poke block before the first ranking. The Dark Speed Poke Block, a mid-level poke block with a black and white pattern. According to the system description, the main ingredients are the lancet berry and jabica berry, along with a dozen different types of berries and medicinal herbs as secondary ingredients. Specifically designed for dark and flying type Pokémon, making it perfect for Murkrow. So, with the points obtained in the first ranking, Cain exchanged for as many berries as possible, and these 2 in particular were the ones he exchanged the most, almost depleting all of Team Rocket's stock on the island. Once made, Cain believes that in the next few days, Murkrow will enter an accelerated growth phase. After thinking for a moment, Cain, who had been busy all day, felt a wave of fatigue. He placed his hands behind his head, looked at the moonlight filtering through the cave's crack, closed his eyes, and, accompanied by Murkrow's calm breathing, fell asleep. The next day, the sun began to rise slowly over the eastern horizon. With the night's disappearance, the forest gradually returned to tranquility. The sounds of insects and beast tracks faded away. A ray of sunlight filtered through the cave's crack, illuminating Cain's face. The gradual increase in temperature woke him from his sleep. It's summer now, and the sun rises quite early. Moreover, after a day of battle yesterday, Cain, unusually, did not wake up before dawn. Maybe it's because things are going increasingly well, which has eased the pressure on his mind. Stretching lazily, Cain looked at Murkrow, who also woke up when he did, and smiled. In his previous life, after becoming a quasi-elite level trainer, Cain gradually relaxed and began to enjoy life. Now, in this new beginning, this was the first time he had slept deeply. Murkrow, your task today is simple, stay here flapping your wings until all the smell in the cave dissipates, Cain told Murkrow. During the previous battle, Murkrow, thanks to the move Tailwind, almost managed to use Gust. Cain believes that with a little more training, it will be able to master it. And if it continues progressing, it might even learn advanced damaging moves like Hurricane earlier than expected. While Murkrow trains the Tailwind move, it can also eliminate bad odors and clean the cave, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Caw! Murkrow nodded firmly. It always carries out Cain's orders precisely. Since its birth, Murkrow has never seen its parents, had a good environment, delicious food, or training, and has often been bullied by other Pokémon. Until it met Cain, the first and only person who has been kind to him. Therefore, besides the loyalty a Pokémon has to its trainer, Murkrow feels a childlike dependence on Cain, as if he were its father. It cannot let Cain down, that is Murkrow's only thought. Seeing Murkrow so motivated, a smile involuntarily formed on Cain's face. Then, he took the yellow berry Pokeblocks of the day from his storage space. Under Murkrow's expectant gaze, he tossed them into the air one by one, and Murkrow quickly devoured them. Burp. Satisfied, Murkrow let out a small burp, then flew to the top of the cave and began flapping its wings, causing a strong wind to blow inside the cave. As Cain was behind Murkrow, even though the wind howled in the cave, it did not affect him at all. After a brief cleanup and a simple breakfast, Cain took several berries and medicinal herbs from his storage space and neatly placed them on a stone. With a clean cloth, he carefully wiped each berry before placing them carefully in place. Then he washed the tools for crushing berries with clean water. Perhaps because there was a lake near the cave, or maybe there was an underground spring, the original owner of the cave decided to build it there. Either way, Cain and Murkrow benefited from this. Compared to the lake water all Pokémon drank, the underground water here was clearer and sweeter. Due to the conditions' limitations, the tools Cain used were very primitive, a wooden mortar and pestle, a manual impurity separator, a manual compressor, and a manual condenser. All the tools were made of simple wood, so the Pokeblock manufacturing process was quite laborious and slow, although the final quality met the standards. As for more advanced Pokeblocks, these simple tools would not be sufficient. Cain carefully peeled and pitted all the berries with a small knife, cut them into uniform sizes according to the system's calculations, then cut and crushed the medicinal herbs, removing the leftover parts. First, he placed the portions of Lancet berry and Jabica berry in the mortar, crushed them by hand, and then, following the system's instructions, added the other berries and medicinal herbs one by one. Each ingredient had to be added precisely, the mixing time had to be accurate, the mixing degree had to be precise, and the order of the ingredients also had to be precise. Due to the strict demands of the Pokeblock manufacturing process, in the Alliance, people who can efficiently make Pokeblocks are very rare. Fortunately, Cain had the system to help him control everything. He only needed to follow the recipe and make the Pokeblocks. After pouring the prepared juice into the appropriate container, he compressed and condensed the mixture, then placed it in a cool spot. Now, he just had to wait for the Pokeblock to be ready. After completing one batch of Pokeblocks, Cain placed the container aside, took the same amount of ingredients, and continued making the next batch. Chapter 11, Savoring. All morning, Murkrow focused on strengthening his wings, learning wind techniques, and gaining a better understanding of flight maneuvers. He only took short breaks when his wings couldn't flap anymore. He diligently followed the training plan set by Cain. Meanwhile, Cain spent the entire morning making Pokeblocks. This time, the Pokeblocks were noticeably more complicated to make than the yellow berry ones he had made before. Due to the simple tools, he was only able to produce a little over 100 Pokeblocks throughout the morning. Cain let out a long sigh as he looked at the piles of Pokeblocks in the containers. Then he stood up from the ground and stretched his legs, which had gone numb from sitting for so long. "All right, Murkrow, that's enough. Take a break. It's time to prepare today's lunch," Cain said. Caw. 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 After flapping his wings a few more times, Murkrow created small whirlwinds that blew the last bits of Zubat droppings out of the cave before stopping and flying to Cain's shoulder. Feeling the weight on his shoulder and with his legs still numb, Cain almost lost his balance and stumbled a bit. Cain patted Murkrow's now soft feathers and, smiling, said, "Don't worry. But it seems your size has recovered, and soon I might not be able to carry you anymore." He said it half-jokingly. In the world of Pokémon, humans have much stronger bodies than those of humans in Cain's first life on Earth. Though his body was still a bit slim, carrying Murkrow wasn't an issue for him. In this world, there are some humans who, although not as strong as Pokémon, have quite robust bodies, comparable to some common Pokémon. There are even people who specifically train for combat, becoming as strong as certain fighting-type Pokémon. In Cain's mind, the clearest example is the future Kanto Elite Four member, the fighting-type expert, Bruno. He has trained his body to the limit, being able to fight a Machamp on equal terms. There are also humans with special abilities, such as Sabrina, the gym leader of Saffron City in Kanto, whose psychic powers are so strong that they surpass most psychic-type Pokémon. Sabrina is also one of the 3 highest-ranking officers in Team Rocket. In his previous life, Cain saw Sabrina once. Her arrogance and haughtiness left a deep impression on him. That's why, while Murkrow trained, Cain also took the opportunity to exercise his own body. He didn't expect to reach Bruno's level, but at least he didn't want to be a burden to his Pokémon. By midday, during lunch, the advantage of living next to the lake became clear. The untouched lake was full of fat fish. After several failed attempts, Murkrow finally learned how to fish, and with great joy, he caught enough fish for lunch. At Team Rocket's base, Cain had obtained some seasonings, which allowed him to simply grill some fish. He and Murkrow enjoyed a pleasant lunch. After resting for a while, Cain said, "All right, the break is over. This afternoon, it's time for some battle training. Murkrow, are you ready?" "Caw. Caw." Murkrow enthusiastically spread his wings and nodded. Although the morning's training had made him feel stronger, what really excited him was the thought of battling. "Wow, you're quite the fighter, hey." Cain smiled and patted Murkrow's head. In the forest, there's no shortage of wild Pokémon. By simply paying attention to the tracks in the forest, you could soon find one, and some ill-tempered Pokémon would even come out to provoke you themselves. Thanks to the system, Cain could scan his opponent's data at any time. If they encountered an opponent that was too strong, they would simply flee, and if they found a suitable Pokémon, Cain would let Murkrow battle. As long as they didn't venture into the territory of a too powerful Pokémon, there wasn't much danger for Cain and Murkrow. Soon, the evening arrived, and a tired Cain and Murkrow returned to the cave. While Murkrow fought, Cain also trained his own body. Recently, Cain's previously weakened body had received enough nutrition, and with conscious training, his once skinny frame had begun to fill out a bit, with muscle definition starting to show. Cain looked at the fully solidified poke blocks in the containers, took one out, and carefully examined it in his hand. The black and white poke block had a jelly-like texture, with a smooth surface and no impurities. Using a small knife, he cut a piece and brought it to his mouth. A bitter and dry taste suddenly exploded in his mouth, and though Cain was prepared, he couldn't help but frown at the flavor hitting his taste buds. The bitterness of the herbs and the dryness of the mixed berries was something only a very experienced breeder could completely break down, and that's without mentioning the complicated manufacturing process. Although the taste wasn't pleasant, this is precisely what Pokémon like. Even after tasting just a small amount of the poke block, Cain felt a slight relief in his tired body and muscles. If that's what he felt, the effects would be even more pronounced for a Pokémon. Cain fed Murkrow the poke block in his hand, and under Murkrow's expectant gaze, he carefully stored the rest of the poke blocks in the storage space of his Team Rocket belt. Seeing Murkrow's disappointed face from not being able to eat more poke blocks and only getting to taste the half he had before, Cain laughed and scolded him, "You greedy little thing, why are you in such a rush? They're all yours. But before that, you have to eat the yellow berry poke blocks for 2 more days." Murkrow had been eating yellow berry poke blocks for 5 days, and the effects were wearing off, but there were still 2 days left. No matter how much he could improve, he had to wait until the effect completely faded before switching. If poke blocks aren't designed to be combined, mixing them could significantly reduce the effects of both. So, Murkrow would have to wait 2 more days. "Caw. Caw." Murkrow quickly shook his head, then nodded, as if trying to hide his desire for the new poke blocks while agreeing with Cain at the same time. Cain sat down and began massaging Murkrow's increasingly soft feathers, using techniques he had learned in his second life. After a day of training and battling, a proper night massage would help the Pokémon recover faster. "Ah! Ah!" Murkrow let out a satisfied sound, as his stiff muscles relaxed, and he closed his eyes to enjoy the moment. After massaging for about half an hour, Murkrow was completely relaxed, and his muscles had loosened. Then, Cain started preparing dinner. Today's menu was a large pot of fish soup, with a creamy white broth and succulent fish meat. After finishing the meal, both of them settled against the rocks and fell into a deep sleep, exhausted from the day. The forest was particularly noisy at night, but the Zubat cave was a place of tranquility. Since the Zubat had occupied the cave for a long time, the night was quite safe. In the end, only the quiet breathing inside the cave could be heard. Chapter 12, Fortuitous Encounter with the Trio. 2 days passed in the busy routine of Cain and his Murkrow. These 2 days were very productive for both, filled with a sense of satisfaction mixed with intensity. If we talk about changes, the most evident one is in appearance. After consuming yellow poke blocks for an entire week, Murkrow has finally emerged from the great slump it was in. Although it's unclear if it has reached its full potential, Murkrow is very pleased. Previously, its size didn't match that of a common Murkrow, but now it has grown to reach 60 cm in height, making it 10 cm taller than the average Murkrow. Its black plumage is firmly attached to its body, and each feather shines with an intense black, making its streamlined body even faster in flight. Its powerful wings reflect great explosive strength, and thanks to daily training, it can now perfectly use flying-type energy. It has even started to master Gust, an advanced flying-type move. Although its body has grown and its weight has increased, its speed hasn't decreased, in fact, it has increased. One could say that both its attack capability and speed have improved significantly. Although the change in Cain is not as obvious as in Murkrow, it is noticeable that he has more energy, and his muscles have begun to strengthen. During Murkrow's daily training, he doesn't fall behind either. Although his clothes remain worn out, his eyes shine with renewed energy. Even the Zubat cave, which used to be very simple, has been completely renovated. The cold floor is now covered with soft straw and tree leaves, and along the wall are 2 wooden shelves filled with medicinal herbs and berries Cain has collected during his outings. A small, simple bed is spread out on the floor, covered with the skin of some animal. Murkrow, the effect of the yellow poke blocks has fully manifested, and since the cycle is over, continuing to eat them won't have much effect. From now on, you can eat those black poke blocks you've been craving, Cain said with a smile as he watched Murkrow preening itself. Upon hearing about the black poke blocks, Murkrow immediately stopped its actions, remembering their previous taste, and involuntarily swallowed, fixing its gaze on Cain. Seeing Murkrow's gluttonous expression, Cain smiled resignedly and pulled out the black poke blocks, which he had been preparing for days, from his storage space, placing them in a special bowl for Murkrow's food. From now on, you can eat as much as you want, Cain said. Unlike the yellow poke blocks, black poke blocks can help improve Pokémon subtly, as they contain a large amount of dark and flying-type energy. The more they eat, the more they can absorb. Cain believes that in the near future, Murkrow will continue to grow alongside these poke blocks. In fact, as an intermediate-level poke block, it contains a large amount of energy. Normally, Murkrow would have to eat many fish to feel full, but after just a few poke blocks, it already feels satisfied. Enjoying the perfect flavor, Murkrow lightly tapped its beak, wishing it could eat more if it weren't already full. While Murkrow enjoyed its lunch, Cain also quickly finished his own meal. The afternoon was reserved for combat training and forest exploration. The Team Rocket base was to the west, so there was no need to explore in that direction. During these 2 days, Cain and Murkrow had been exploring the forest to the east, where they encountered many different Pokémon and learned about some Pokémon groups in the area. One of them is a Spearow group 8 km away, and another is a Pidgey group 15 km away. These 2 groups are mortal enemies and frequently fight each other. However, due to their large numbers, Cain didn't dare provoke them. The Spearow group has a level 22 Fearow, while the Pidgey group has a pair of level 21 Pidgeotto. Both groups are quite strong and well balanced. Today's goal was to explore southward, taking Murkrow on a light journey. With Murkrow's current size, it can no longer perch on Cain's shoulder, so Murkrow now circles above his head, staying alert to its surroundings. Cain doesn't know the exact size of the trial island, but it must be quite large. After being away from the Team Rocket base for several days, he still hasn't encountered anyone. Although not everyone stays outside all the time, like the first-place contestant in the first trial, Xander, who only goes out to explore the forest during the day and returns to the base before sunset. However, today that situation might change. After walking 3 kilometers south, Cain encountered 3 participants who were exploring as a group, sitting under a tree, resting. Murkrow was the first to spot them and, after informing Cain, they quietly approached the trio's position. The 3 were sitting together, as if discussing something, with their Pokémon by their side. Of the 3, the one who seemed to be the leader was a sturdy man with a coughing. Another was a rather short guy with an oddish, and the third had a very ordinary appearance, dressed in a green t-shirt, and his Pokémon was a Zubat. "Are we heading in the right direction if we keep going, big brother?" the shortest of the group asked. The sturdy man glanced at the short guy and said disdainfully, "Don't you trust me?" His gaze toward the short guy was full of scorn. Oddish is a very weak Pokémon at low levels, and it can easily be found in this forest. No, no, big brother, of course we trust you. You're a top competitor who placed 10th in the first trial, the young man in green quickly replied. The sturdy man seemed more satisfied with the young man's response, and the flattery clearly pleased him, as seen in the smile that appeared on his face. Humph, if it weren't for the fact that my coughing isn't good at direct attacks, my position would have been much higher, the sturdy man said, though his tone softened. Of course, with your strength, you could definitely be in the top 3, the short guy quickly added, realizing his mistake. With an Oddish as his Pokémon, which is relatively docile, he didn't have much trouble taming it. However, Oddish is a rather weak Pokémon, and since this guy is interacting with a Pokémon for the first time, he doesn't know how to train it. He needs someone strong to support him if he wants to advance in this trial. Seeing that the short guy was starting to understand how to talk, the sturdy man, known as Big Brother, nodded with satisfaction. Although the short guy wasn't very strong, at least he was obedient, so the sturdy man agreed to let him follow. After a pause, he said, I got this using my ranking points to exchange for it at the base store. It's a treasure map. Although the area it shows is small, it's clearly marked with the nearby Pokémon groups. The Rattata group we found earlier was marked on the map, meaning we're heading in the right direction. As the 10th place finisher in the first trial, the sturdy man exchanged all his points for a treasure map. Not everyone has a clear plan like Cain, who knows what he and his Pokémon need. That's why Team Rocket made many treasure maps available in the store, some real and some fake, with different prices. Many people, like this sturdy man, choose to take a risk and buy a treasure map. Clearly, this sturdy man is one of those who decided to bet on a map. Chapter 13, Battling the Trio. Listening to the conversation of the 3 people not far away, Cain maintained a calm expression, but his eyes gleamed. He knew that Team Rocket had many treasure maps, and he also knew that some of them hid real treasures. However, due to his needs, he hadn't redeemed them immediately. He planned to do so later, but he didn't expect his first encounter with someone would be with the treasure hunting trio. Cain had some impression of the chubby boy. He used a yellow quality coughing. Although its level wasn't very high, its talent was notable. As for the other 2, he didn't have a strong impression. However, regardless of the situation, since he had encountered them in the wild and they were carrying something that interested Cain, there was no other choice but to fight. His mind began to work quickly. If he was going to attack, he had to be fully prepared. The chubby boy's coughing was a fairly strong opponent, but Cain wasn't sure if it had learned the move self-destruct. They were too far away now, and the system couldn't scan the data. The green-clad boy's Zubat seemed to have grown well, judging by its appearance. As for the little one's Oddish, it was doubly weak to Murkrow's flying type, so it wouldn't be much of a problem. Facing 3 trained Pokémon is different from facing wild ones. Fortunately, Murkrow had grown quite rapidly in recent days. With a quick glance, Murkrow's stats appeared before his eyes. Pokémon, Murkrow, green. Gender, male. Level, 12. Type, dark, flying. Ability, prankster. Held item, none. Egg moves, punishment, feint attack, roost. Basic moves, peck, astonish, pursuit, haze. Learned moves, snatch, tailwind, gust. TMS, none. After 2 days of combat, Murkrow had leveled up once more and learned the moves haze and gust. Cain crawled along the ground, advancing cautiously. The dense forest undergrowth provided excellent cover, and Murkrow stuck to his back, not daring to make the slightest sound. When they were less than 5 meters from the trio, Cain stopped. This was the limit, getting closer could get him discovered. This distance was enough for the system to perform a scan. A flash in his eyes, and the information of the 3 Pokémon appeared before him. As he had suspected, a yellow quality coughing at level 14, which hadn't learned self-destruct, an orange quality Zubat at level 13, and, to Cain's surprise, the little one's Oddish was also yellow quality, though only at level 11, indicating it probably hadn't been trained properly. Now that he knew their data, Cain's plan became clearer. Although Oddish's level was low and its combat power weak, it was still a Pokémon. Fighting 1 against 3 was much harder than fighting 1 against 2, and Oddish was doubly weak to Murkrow, so his first target had to be Oddish. Murkrow, activate Tailwind. Then, directly attack Oddish, use Gust for a long-range strike, and then close in with Peck to finish it off, Cain said softly, making sure only he and Murkrow could hear him. Murkrow nodded resolutely. After several days of fighting, he and Cain had developed a great sense of synchronization. With just a slight instruction, Murkrow knew what to do. Cain raised 3 fingers, signaling the countdown. As the fingers began to fold, a white stream of air appeared around Murkrow. Amidst the white and black colors, his eyes became sharper and sharper. 1. The last finger dropped. Whoosh! Murkrow's wings flapped powerfully, and a strong wind blew through the underbrush, flattening the vegetation and exposing Cain, who had been hiding. Cain shook his head in resignation and stood up slowly. In an instant, Murkrow rushed toward Oddish. Amid the surprised expressions of the trio, a wind as sharp as a blade surged from Murkrow's wings, heading straight for the terrified Oddish. Gust. A flying-type move that, if it hit, would deal significant damage to Oddish. The 3 reacted quickly, moving away from Murkrow's attack zone. Surprisingly, the chubby boy was the most agile of them all. As they moved, Coughing and Zubat also reacted, dodging the attack. The strong wind reached Oddish in an instant, striking hard against its astonished expression. Bang! Bang! With 2 blows, Oddish fell to the ground, even leaving a slight dent in the earth, showing the great power of Murkrow's attacks. Taking advantage of everyone being occupied dodging, Murkrow, after launching Gust, quickly closed in and attacked Oddish with Peck. Coughing, tackle. Zubat, use bite. The other 2 reacted quickly and gave orders. Murkrow, dodge. Cain, now that he had been discovered, didn't try to hide anymore. Seeing the 2 issue attack orders, he swiftly commanded Murkrow to evade. Murkrow lifted off, barely dodging the attacks from the 2 Pokémon. Although he didn't manage to finish off Oddish, it was already on the verge of defeat. Oddish! The little one cried, tears in his eyes, seeing his Oddish fall to the ground, unable to get up. Although worried, he didn't dare approach, his small, thin body couldn't withstand even a single attack from Murkrow. The chubby boy shot a glance at his companion, who was sobbing on the ground, and spat 2 words with a rigid expression, useless. Finally, both recognized who had attacked them. The chubby boy and the green-clad boy frowned, clearly also recognizing Cain. After all, he had come in second in the first trial. It's you, the lucky one who got second place, the chubby boy said coldly. Cain flashed a slight smile and looked at them without saying a word. Apparently, Cain's tactics in the trial had spread throughout the base, and most people thought it had just been a trick and that he was nothing special. Cain didn't bother to correct that perception. Don't think that just because you got second place through tricks, you're something special. Those are just cheap tricks. Instead of hiding well, you dare to attack us by surprise, you're asking for your death. The chubby boy said this while performing a series of movements, signaling the green-clad boy to start an attack. The green-clad boy understood the signal. Zubat, close in and use wing attack. Coughing, smog. Murkrow, gust. Disperse the smog, Cain calmly responded to the attack. Influenced by Cain, Murkrow also showed no signs of nervousness. Zubat, facing Murkrow's gust, quickly approached while taking damage, with one of its wings glowing faintly as it aimed to attack Murkrow. The smog was dispersed by Gust, but at the same time, Coughing quickly moved closer. Struck by Zubat's wing attack, Murkrow was sent flying several meters back. Although he took damage, his current body wasn't affected enough to interfere in the battle. Coughing, assurance. Seeing Murkrow had been hit, the chubby boy quickly issued the command. Assurance is a move that doubles its power if the opponent has taken damage beforehand. At this moment, Assurance's power was at 120, which would be devastating if it hit Murkrow. Murkrow, don't forget your speed. Use all of Tailwind to dodge. Cain remained calm in the face of such a powerful move as Assurance. No matter how strong the move's power was, only the moves that hit count. Feint attack and strike Zubat. With Tailwind at its maximum power, Murkrow moved faster, dodging Coughing's attack and quickly closing in on Zubat. Zubat, dodge quickly. The green-clad boy ordered, seeing Murkrow approach Zubat rapidly. But unfortunately, Feint attack is a move with a high hit rate. Bang! Murkrow's sharp beak struck Zubat with force, and then he quickly retreated, not staying to fight. Chapter 14, Weedle Territory. It didn't take long before Murkrow repeatedly dodged Coughing's attacks and then struck Zubat. After a series of blows, Zubat was also knocked out, lying on the ground. Cain flashed a cold smile. Once Zubat was dealt with, coughing, which was slower, wouldn't pose much of a threat. The chubby boy gritted his teeth, desperately wanting to face Murkrow, but he couldn't even touch a feather of the Pokémon. The boy in green looked at Zubat lying on the ground, his face pale, not knowing what to do. "Idiots, what are you standing there for? It's just one person. Why don't you attack him directly? Are you waiting for him to kill you?" The chubby boy shouted, his neck reddened with rage. If coughing lost the ability to fight as well, the fate of the three would be clear. Thinking about this, sweat started running down his forehead. Hearing the chubby boy's words, the boy in green gritted his teeth and pulled a knife from his belt, gripping it tightly in his hand. He too knew very well what would happen if coughing fell. Even the small boy, who had been in shock, recovered, stood up trembling, and his eyes began to redden slightly. As if in agreement, both of them rushed toward Cain at the same time. Cain remained impassive. As a former member of Team Rocket in his past life, he had seen it all. These were just two inexperienced teenagers. Though his body was still somewhat weak, thanks to his training in combat techniques, he had nothing to fear from these two boys. But, since it had come to this, the three of them no longer posed a threat to him. "Murkrow, finish off the chubby one first," Cain said as he knocked the two boys to the ground and addressed Murkrow. "Caw!" Murkrow screeched while flapping its wings. Under the terrified gaze of the chubby boy, Murkrow's sharp claws slashed his throat. The chubby boy tried to say something as he grasped his throat with both hands, but he couldn't utter a word and slowly fell to the ground. Without anyone to guide it, coughing became an easy target, and under Murkrow's consecutive attacks, it too lost its life. In the end, the three boys and their Pokémon fell under the attacks of Cain and Murkrow. Cain ignored the desperate looks of the three. He was used to death and knew very well that this wasn't a kind world. This was a cruel world, a real world where only those prepared for death could survive. Showing mercy to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. In this trial, those who survived would be the winners. With skill, Cain removed the storage belts from the three and, together with Murkrow, quickly left the scene. The smell of blood would soon attract wild Pokémon from the forest, and their bodies would satisfy the appetites of those Pokémon. He didn't know how long they had walked when Cain and Murkrow sat under a tree. Cain took out some black poke blocks for Murkrow to recover energy, and then emptied the contents of the three belts, leaving a pile of miscellaneous items scattered on the ground. There wasn't anything particularly useful among the items, so Cain kept a knife, some food, and a few survival tools. What surprised him the most was finding a healing spray bottle among the green-clothed boy's belongings. He had no idea where he had gotten it from, probably stolen from someone else. Looking at the crumpled treasure map in his hand, Cain felt speechless. Though he knew these treasure maps had been placed by Team Rocket as rewards for newcomers, the quality of the drawing left much to be desired. Even the letters were crooked, which wasn't surprising considering they could be redeemed for just 100 points. Based on the earlier conversation of the three, the direction of the treasure map should be south of the cave, and according to the map's information, after passing through 2 Pokémon territories, they should reach the location. The chubby boy had said they had already passed through Rattata territory, so the next step would be entering Weedle territory. The exact location of the treasure was probably within Caterpie territory. Compared to Caterpie territory, where the treasure was buried, Weedle territory was much more dangerous. It's important to note that bug-type Pokémon usually grow quickly, which means that in Weedle territory, there were almost certainly Beedrill. A group of Beedrill dominates any forest, not because they're extremely strong, but due to their strong sense of community. If you provoke one Beedrill, you'll face an endless pursuit from the entire swarm. Additionally, Beedrill is an extremely territorial Pokémon with a strong urge to attack. I hope there are few Beedrill in this group, otherwise, I'll have to take another route, Cain said with a sigh. At this moment, both he and Murkrow shuddered at the thought of facing a swarm of Beedrill. However, the map only showed a simple path, and no one knew what they might encounter if they took an alternative route. They could run into a river that would push them further away from their goal, or they might meet an even stronger Pokémon. Faced with unknown dangers, known dangers were much more acceptable. Since he already had the treasure map, not seeing what was there wouldn't be in Cain's character. He stored the treasure map in his storage space, stood up, and dusted off his clothes. He had Murkrow dig a small hole in the ground and buried the 3 belts along with all the useless items, covering them with a layer of dirt and stomping it down a bit. Shortly after, in a dense forest, Cain held a knife in his right hand, cutting through the thorns and branches blocking his path as he crouched. Murkrow flapped its wings softly in the air, not making much noise, a scene that looked a bit comical. Cain and Murkrow had entered the Weedle territory shown on the map. After their battle with the three, they had traveled about 7 or 8 kilometers, entering Weedle territory. Once inside this zone, both Cain and Murkrow moved cautiously, hoping to cross without drawing the attention of the Beedrill. After carefully advancing for a kilometer, Cain let out a small sigh of relief. Up until that point, he hadn't seen any trace of Weedle, Kakuna, or Beedrill. However, just as he was beginning to relax, he spotted an area of the forest where trees large enough to be surrounded by a person were covered in golden cocoons. Almost every tree had 3 or 4 cocoons hanging from them, and from a distance, the green of the forest was speckled with golden spots. Cain took a deep breath and stopped to observe for a moment. Fortunately, he didn't see any Beedrill. However, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. If Kakuna was startled while in its cocoon, it would immediately evolve into Beedrill. Given the current situation, if one appeared, an entire swarm would soon follow. Although the newly evolved Beedrill wouldn't pose much of a challenge for Murkrow, the sheer number would be enough to make Murkrow feel intimidated. Moving even more cautiously, after 2 hours they finally managed to cross Weedle territory. However, it wouldn't be long before this area became Beedrill territory. Given the nature of Beedrill, if no unexpected events occurred, they would soon become one of the most powerful groups in this forest. Chapter 15, Pinsir. Cain wiped the small drops of sweat that had appeared on his forehead. Despite everything he had seen in his life, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. If, in the middle of his path, a Kakuna suddenly turned into a Beedrill, even if he could escape, he would likely end up seriously injured. It's important to remember that Beedrill is a bug and poison-type Pokémon. If he were to get poisoned and didn't have an antidote, surviving would be a stroke of luck. Finally, Cain left the terrifying forest of Kakuna behind. The sense of relief was immediate, and even the air felt much fresher. Murkrow, who had been restrained for a long time, flew energetically in the sky. The tension of the previous situation had weighed heavily on him. Despite being a flying-type Pokémon, facing a swarm of almost 100 Beedrill, his only option was to flee in terror. The next place they headed was Caterpie's territory. If it followed the same logic as Weedle's territory, it had probably also become a forest of Metapod. However, unlike Kakuna, Metapod is a docile Pokémon. As long as they weren't attacked first, passing through their territory shouldn't pose any danger. Even if the forest contained Butterfree, which are also peaceful by nature, there wouldn't be any major problems. After checking the map again to make sure he was going in the right direction, Cain was finally able to straighten up and walk with more confidence. Murkrow flew in circles in the air, like a bird newly freed from a cage, with no intention of stopping anytime soon. According to the landmarks, after walking a few more kilometers, when he found a small hill, the treasure would be there. The sun was beginning to set, and the shadows of the trees and Cain intertwined on the ground. The Caterpie forest didn't pose a great threat, and Cain passed by several Metapod patiently waiting for their time to evolve into Butterfree. Finally, he reached the small hill marked on the map. At the top of the hill was a tree so large that it would take 3 people to wrap around its trunk. The treasure was buried under that tree. However, what surprised Cain was seeing a Pokémon with 2 large horns on its head clinging to the tree, moving slightly as if searching for something. Cain raised his hand and signaled Murkrow to come down. Seeing Cain's signal, Murkrow stopped flying in circles and quickly swooped down to him. Cain, along with Murkrow, began to approach the hill. About 5 meters away, Cain used the system to scan the data of the Pokémon in front of him. Pokémon, Pinsir, Orange. Gender, Female. Level, 18. Type, Bug. Ability, Hypercutter. Held item, Resin. Egg move, Faint. Basic moves, Vice Grip, Focus Energy, Bind, Seismic Toss, Harden, Revenge, Vital Throw. Learned move, Bite. Trademark moves, none. After seeing Pinsir's data on the screen, Cain frowned slightly. He knew this type of Pokémon very well, as in his previous life he had a Pinsir of exceptional quality that played a key role in his team. With a base attack stat of 125 and 100 in defense, plus a speed of 85, Pinsir could have been an extremely sought-after Pokémon if it weren't for its low health and inability to evolve. Even in its current state, Pinsir was known as a trainer killer for beginners. Bug-type Pokémon grow quickly, and with Pinsir's high offensive power and the moves it learns early on, it becomes a deadly threat to opponents. Pinsir has a fierce temperament and will attack any Pokémon that comes near. And if it catches you with its large horns, escaping is almost impossible. The Pinsir that Cain is facing is at level 18. Although it's only of orange quality, it is still the strongest opponent that Cain and Murkrow have faced so far. It was clear that this Pinsir was the guardian of the hill. If Cain wanted to get the treasure, he would have to face it, and with Pinsir's temperament, a battle was inevitable. Murkrow, be careful not to get caught by its horns, Cain warned seriously. Fortunately, Murkrow is a dark and flying type Pokémon, giving him a double advantage against Pinsir. Caw. Murkrow also sensed that the opponent wouldn't be easy to defeat and nodded in understanding. Cain began devising a strategy in his mind, trying to avoid a direct confrontation with Pinsir. Murkrow, use Gust. The Pinsir, who was enjoying its meal, was suddenly attacked, and on top of that, it was a flying type move, its least favorite type. It felt a sharp pain in its body. A wave of rage surged in Pinsir's heart. As the leader of the area, she had always been the one intimidating others. How dare they attack her, and while she was enjoying her meal? This was like adding fuel to the fire. Grr! Pinsir roared in fury as it charged towards Murkrow. It knew that little Pokémon was the one who had interrupted its moment of enjoyment. As Pinsir ran, it took a deep breath, concentrated its energy, and a gust of wind surged from its feet. It was using focus energy, a move that increases the chance of landing a critical hit. With its high attack power combined with the possibility of a critical hit, a single blow from Pinsir could be deadly. Murkrow, use Snatch, Cain ordered quickly upon noticing Pinsir's shift. A dark energy emerged around Pinsir, and the gust of wind it had accumulated instantly dissipated, appearing around Murkrow in the form of a black shadow. Feeling the power contained in that shadow, Murkrow's eyes sharpened. Snatch is a dark-type move that, with Murkrow's prankster ability, allowed it to steal the effect of focus energy before Pinsir could benefit from it. Enjoying the effect of focus energy, Murkrow kept a close eye on Pinsir, observing every movement of its body, noting small inconsistencies that could be weak points to exploit. Murkrow, use Gust again. With the prankster ability, any attempt by its opponent to power up became useless and could even be turned against them. Upon hearing the command, Murkrow flapped its wings, generating an even sharper gust of wind than before, aimed at the inconsistencies it had noticed in Pinsir's body. Bang! Bang! 2 blasts of wind hit Pinsir. Grr! Pinsir cried out in pain. Not only was it confused by the ineffectiveness of its usual move, but now it felt an even sharper pain than before. Its eyes filled with rage. Without the ability to fly, Pinsir found itself powerless against Murkrow's cunning tactics, like a child facing an adult, unable to do anything. It was being attacked but couldn't strike back, and that powerlessness only fueled its frustration. Resigned, Pinsir decided to use one of its least favorite moves. Concentrating all its strength, its body tensed. It was using Harden, a move that increases its defense. Chapter 16, Trademark. Watching Pinsir's actions, Cain almost laughed out loud. This was one of the differences between wild Pokémon and those with a trainer. Without someone to guide them, they rely on their own intelligence and instincts to fight. How could he not take advantage of that? Keep using Snatch. Pinsir was tensing its body tightly, but what it didn't know was that its opponent was waiting for it to use that move. The familiar dark aura surrounded it once again, and the effect of Murkrow's Snatch move manifested once more. Pinsir was puzzled after trying to use the move Harden. Although it didn't use it often, it shouldn't have any effect, right? Unwilling to give up, it used Harden again. This time, it finally saw the dark aura flying from its side toward Murkrow. Although it didn't know what it was, it realized it was all the work of that annoying dark bird in the sky, which it had never seen before. And at that moment, Murkrow was feeling incredible. With the double boost from Harden, it felt like it was covered in armor, and its feathers had become so tough that they made a metallic sound when they rubbed together. Pinsir could only roar in frustration, powerless to do anything else. After enduring another gust of wind, Pinsir gave up, turned around, and fled. Against such a shameless opponent, all it could do was run away. But, while Pinsir had a base speed of 85, Murkrow also had a speed of 91 points, and it was boosted by Tailwind. Could Pinsir escape? The answer was clearly no. Under a series of powerful attacks from Murkrow with the effect of focus energy, Pinsir finally collapsed, helpless in its attempt to flee. However, this time Cain didn't let Murkrow finish it off. It wasn't that he felt sorry for Pinsir or wanted to catch it, but he thought this Pinsir was an excellent Pokémon to train against. Defeating Pinsir caused Murkrow to level up, reaching level 13, which showed that defeating such a high-level opponent gave it a great amount of experience. Craw! Murkrow cried out energetically after defeating Pinsir. It had never had such a satisfying battle, or rather, such a satisfying attack. Who wouldn't want to attack without having to worry about being attacked back? Paying no more attention to the fallen Pinsir, Cain ignored it. Since he had already decided that Pinsir would be the perfect target to train and level up Murkrow, whether Pinsir should feel grateful or sorry for its luck remained unknown. Slowly walking toward the large tree, Cain looked up and realized the tree was much bigger up close than it had seemed from a distance. Its dense branches and leaves stretched out like a green cloud, blocking the sun and casting a refreshing shadow on the ground. Cain grabbed a nearby dry branch and began digging into the soft soil beneath the tree. Without tools, he could only do it in a rudimentary way. Fortunately, the earth was soft, and with a bit of effort, he could drive the branch into the ground. As Cain concentrated on digging, Murkrow had already made a complete circle around the tree and was now perched on one of the larger branches, nodding repeatedly as if admiring the tree. As a flying-type Pokémon, it had a natural affinity with trees. Bang! As he dug hard, Cain hit a solid object. He put the branch aside and used his hands to clear the dirt from the object, revealing a metal box that glimmered in the sunlight. He had only dug about 10 centimeters deep. Cain realized why it had been so easy to dig. They probably hadn't tried to bury it very deep, just enough to hide it. Carefully, Cain pulled the metal box out of the ground, shook it slightly. It wasn't heavy. After brushing the dirt off the surface, it revealed a completely silver box. Murkrow flew down quickly and stood beside him, curiously eyeing the box. Cain sat cross-legged, placing the silver box on his lap. There was a small lock securing the lid. Murkrow, gently open this lock, Cain instructed Murkrow. With a clink, the lock was easily destroyed by Murkrow, with no effort. Slowly opening the box, Cain found a palm-sized disc emitting a white glow. Apart from this disc, there was nothing else inside the box. Seeing the contents of the box, Cain couldn't help but feel his facial muscles twitch. First, a treasure map valued at just 100 points, then a rudimentary map drawn with questionable accuracy, a barely hidden burial site, and finally, a big box with just one disc inside. The whole rocket team's operation seemed so careless that Cain didn't know what to think. Although he knew these treasures were just to entertain the trial participants, this was the first time he had encountered something so random. He shook his head to clear the disorganized thoughts. Although this 100-point treasure box didn't contain much, Cain was satisfied with its contents. If he wasn't mistaken, that disc was a technical machine, also known as a trademark. As for what move it contained, it could only be known by using a special machine, unless there was some special indication. However, since the disc emitted a white glow, it was likely a normal type move. Regardless of the move, it was definitely worth more than 100 points. After closing the box, he stored it in the storage system. Since he didn't need it now, he would check it the next time he returned to the base to see if Murkrow could learn the move. If not, he could sell the disc to Team Rocket and exchange it for some points. Team Rocket had a points system that allowed participants to earn points not only through the trials but also by trading items or completing missions. Both outside and on this trial island, Team Rocket maintained this system. However, earning points wasn't easy. On the island, Cain had taken a look at the available missions at Team Rocket's base. Most of them were simple tasks like cleaning or collecting berries and herbs. Even though Cain had spent only 80 points to trade for berries, gathering berries would only give a few points. Tasks like cleaning awarded only 1 point per completed task. However, Cain guessed this was because the new recruits had just arrived on the island, and the more difficult missions weren't available to them yet. Although Team Rocket had no qualms about the participants' deaths, they didn't want to waste this resource without reason. After all, the participants were trainers with Pokémon, and even if they weren't very strong, they were more useful than ordinary people. Additionally, Team Rocket offered 70% of the exchange value for items sold to them. That is, an item worth 100 points would only give you 70 points if sold, ensuring that Team Rocket never lost out in a deal. Despite this, many still traded valuable items for points due to the rare things Team Rocket offered. Thus, the only person likely willing to spend 100 points on a treasure map was that fat guy who wanted to try his luck. But in the end, Cain and Murkrow benefited. Though Cain found Team Rocket's careless attitude ridiculous, he was satisfied with this treasure. If he was lucky and the disc contained a rare move, it could be worth thousands of points. After storing the box with the disc in the storage system, Cain didn't rush to leave. Instead, he rested his head on his hand and began to ponder. The plan he had set for Murkrow over the week was now complete, and it seemed that Murkrow had regained much of its strength. Whether it had reached its optimal state, Cain didn't know. Since the plan was complete, and with more than 2 months left on the island, it was necessary to design a detailed plan for the future. First, due to limited resources and time, Cain didn't plan to capture more Pokémon on the island. After all, only one Pokémon could be used in the trial. Focusing on training Murkrow was the priority. Second, leveling up Murkrow was crucial. Since it hadn't dared to battle much in the past, Murkrow's level was relatively low compared to the other participants. During the treasure hunt, Cain developed a plan. And after defeating that level 18 Pinsir, he was confident in its viability. Murkrow, being a dark and flying type Pokémon, was strong against psychic and ghost types, although those types were rare on the island. But Murkrow also had an advantage over grass, bug, and fighting types, and these Pokémon were abundant on the island. Additionally, the 2 areas Cain had passed earlier, the Weedle and Caterpie territories, were practically perfect training grounds for flying type Pokémon. Although Weedle would evolve into Kakuna and Caterpie into Metapod, that wouldn't be a significant problem. Even if swarms of Beedrill or Butterfree appeared, Murkrow, with Tailwind and the Prankster ability, could employ guerrilla tactics without much risk. Chapter 17, The Appearance of Beedrill. However, today's time is not enough. The sun is about to set, and fighting a swarm of Beedrill at night is not ideal for guerrilla tactics. Although Beedrill has poor vision at night and may not see Murkrow, who blends into the darkness, Cain wouldn't be able to orient himself well in the dark either, and there are too many unknowns at night. No one can guarantee that a powerful Pokémon won't suddenly appear. All they could do at that moment was wander around the hill, investigating which Pokémon groups lived nearby, to help plan an escape route later. Before the sun fully set, Cain and Murkrow returned under the large tree at the top of the hill. Even now, Cain and Murkrow couldn't fully handle the dangers of the forest at night. The area around this tree probably originally belonged to Pinsir, but now that Murkrow had defeated him, they legitimately claimed this territory, so they weren't afraid of other Pokémon coming to bother them during the night. As for that Pinsir defeated by Murkrow, when Cain and Murkrow returned from their exploration, it was nowhere to be found. Whether it had left on its own or been taken by another Pokémon was unknown. Around the small hill, the central territory belonged to Caterpie and Metapod. To the north was the Kakuna territory. To the east, a group of Oddish, among which there were some fairly strong gloom. To the south, some Pinsir lived scattered around, with a similar level to the one Murkrow defeated today. To the west, there was no particular group of Pokémon, only some weaker ones. Setting irrelevant matters aside for now, Cain lit a campfire under the tree with dry branches and leaves, placed the poke blocks in a wooden bowl, and, under Murkrow's eager gaze, indicated it could start eating. After a day of battling, Murkrow's appetite had noticeably increased. With the current poke blocks, the more it ate, the more it could absorb. Watching Murkrow devour its food, Cain smiled, pulled out some strips of dried meat from his storage space, lightly roasted them over the campfire, then drank some warm water and solved his dinner simply. Though the meal was modest, it still allowed him to replenish the energy spent during the day. As night fell, the forest, which had been quiet, began to fill with noise, with the sounds of insects and frogs echoing everywhere. Cain and Murkrow didn't seek trouble, they climbed the tree, chose the largest branch as a bed, and soon fell asleep. The night passed without incident. Time went by peacefully, and when the sun rose in the east, Cain and Murkrow were already awake. After living in the forest for so long, Cain had left behind all the bad habits he'd acquired in his previous life when he reached the level of a quasi-elite trainer and began to enjoy life. Just like the previous night, they quickly dealt with breakfast, and under the morning sunlight, they headed to the Kakuna territory, their target for the day. Today, the place to conquer was Kakuna territory. Just like before, Cain safely crossed the Caterpie and Metapod territory and headed straight for the forest where he had previously seen Kakuna hanging everywhere. Seeing the forest full of Kakuna, Cain was speechless. If someone with entomophobia saw this, they would surely run away immediately. Weedle, Kakuna, and Beedrill are a classic example of the rapid evolution of bug-type Pokémon. A Weedle can complete its final evolution in about 15 days, as long as resources are sufficient and nothing goes wrong. The final form, Beedrill, has good speed and attack power. In large numbers, few Pokémon would dare provoke them. But when they are still in the Weedle and Kakuna forms, they are very vulnerable. As Weedle, unless they experience something unusual, they basically only know String Shot and Poison Sting, with very low defense and health. After evolving into Kakuna, although their defense improves, the only move they learn is Harden, and they're even easier to attack due to their lack of mobility. According to the Team Rocket map, this place should have been just Weedle territory, which is why it was labeled as such. The treasure should have been buried before the trial participants arrived on the island, but not too long before, so based on the timing, these Kakuna shouldn't be ready to evolve yet. Cain approached and briefly scanned the area. The Kakuna were level 7 or 8. Though not high level, there were enough of them to provide a good amount of experience, right? This was part of his plan. For the defenseless Kakuna, Cain would show no mercy. Besides, if these Kakuna ever evolved en masse, they would be a great threat to everyone in the forest. This could also be seen as an act of protection for the rest of the forest. Murkrow used Tailwind and Gust on the Kakuna. Increase the attack range and destroy them all, Cain ordered after preparing. Caw. Caw. Murkrow nodded, thumping its chest as if to say, "Don't worry, these immobile prey are no problem." Murkrow didn't remember how scared it had been crossing this very forest before. The situation now was different from before. Earlier, they had to cross the forest and were in the middle of all the Kakuna. If something went wrong and they triggered the premature evolution of all the Kakuna, they would have really been surrounded. But now, the advantage was clearly on Murkrow and Cain's side. With their speed, they could hit and move easily, without anyone being able to stop them. This forest was just a small part of Kakuna territory. Two small whirlwinds formed in Murkrow's wings. As the whirlwinds spread, they grew in size and power. Under the horrified gazes of the Kakuna, dozens were caught and destroyed. Woo! 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 The Kakuna screamed. No one knew that while they rested, they would fall into such an unexpected disaster. Seeing their companions fall, the Kakuna still hanging from the trees shook desperately and screamed. Murkrow showed no mercy in battle. Though the opponents were weak, as long as they were enemies, they had to be defeated. Without any hesitation, Murkrow created 2 more gusts and hurled them at the remaining Kakuna, taking them down again. Being a flying type move, and given the great difference in level and quality, no Kakuna could withstand even a single attack from Murkrow. Under its continuous Tailwind plus Gust attack, all the Kakuna in the forest lost their lives. Cain was satisfied with Murkrow's capability. This territory was just the tip of the iceberg, and the task was still arduous. Bzz. 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 Suddenly, Cain heard a sound approaching quickly, like the buzzing of bees. Cain frowned. Had he miscalculated, and the Beedrill had already formed? If so, his plan could not be carried out. He didn't have to wait long. In a moment, 5 red-eyed Beedrill appeared before him. Seeing that there were only 5, Cain relaxed a little. If there had been more, he would have had to retreat. Cain was familiar with Beedrill, either from his previous experiences or from the shows and games of his past life. Initially, when Cain saw Beedrill in the animated series, he thought their power was mediocre but that they appeared in large numbers. Until later, when Giovanni's Beedrill, the Team Rocket leader, appeared, Cain completely changed his opinion of this Pokémon. Suddenly, Beedrill was no longer an ordinary Pokémon but one with great speed and attack power. If enough resources were invested in its training, the results would be worthwhile. Though it wouldn't be possible to raise a Beedrill to the level of a champion-level Pokémon like Giovanni did, with proper training, it could reach the level of an Elite Trainer or even an Elite Four. Giovanni's initial Pokémon was a Beedrill, and being the only son of the previous Team Rocket leader, and the current leader, the resources he had at his disposal were unimaginable. Giovanni surely invested more resources than he got in return, but he had the money to do so. It's important to remember that in the manga, Giovanni's Beedrill defeated Lance's Drago Knight, the Johto League champion. On one side, there was the Team Rocket leader, and on the other, the League champion, both in a similar position but with Pokémon of different levels. On one hand, a Beedrill, one of the most common bug-type Pokémon, and on the other, Drago Knight, a pseudo-legendary Pokémon. However, Beedrill was the victor. Though much of the credit went to Giovanni, this shows that Beedrill's potential is not low. Most importantly, with the appearance of Mega Evolution, Beedrill became a highly sought-after Pokémon. The Mega Beedrill with the adaptability ability has impressive attack power and speed, making it a machine of destruction in battle. With a rapid growth process, in just half a month, Beedrill can become a competent fighter, and with a little additional training, it can reach considerable power. Moreover, with the arrival of Mega Evolution, Beedrill became one of the most popular Pokémon. On Earth, when Mega Beedrill appeared, nearly everyone had one. Not having a Mega Beedrill meant you weren't a true Pokémon player. In this world, Beedrill is practically the ideal Pokémon for novice trainers. Chapter 18, The Beedrill Hive. In this world, most trainers come from the working class. Not everyone is lucky enough to receive a starter Pokémon with excellent potential upon turning 10, as shown in the animated series. Only the children of key members of the Pokémon League, or those who have made significant contributions, can receive one of these Pokémon, after paying a high annual fee from the child's birth until they reach the appropriate age. For commoners, obtaining one of these starter Pokémon is almost impossible. So, what do they do if they want to become trainers? If they have a family member who is already a trainer, they could help them catch a Pokémon. But if they don't, and they still want to become trainers, Beedrill is an excellent choice. Weedle is easy to catch. With a little care to avoid its poisonous attacks, you can have a Pokémon right away. Moreover, Drill's growth cycle is extremely short. Without needing to invest much time or resources, you can obtain a Pokémon with decent combat ability, opening the possibility of capturing other Pokémon later. Even those with family members who are trainers often choose Beedrill as their first Pokémon due to its rapid growth, decent potential, and reasonable combat capability. Of course, more privileged trainers are not interested in Beedrill. Not everyone is lucky enough to encounter a high-potential Pokémon and have the resources necessary to develop it, as Giovanni did. If they have the resources, it's better to invest in a pseudo-legendary Pokémon, which, once mature, becomes an elite fighter. In his previous life, Cain also wanted to raise a Beedrill, but in the end, he abandoned the idea. It was too difficult. Getting Beedrill to a standard combat level is easy and quick, but when you try to push it further, you realize the investment isn't worth it. Moreover, Beedrill has too short a lifespan. Before you can fully develop it, its power will start to decline due to its lifespan limitation. Not everyone possesses Giovanni's forest power to resist the passage of time. However, as a transitional Pokémon, Beedrill is still a good option. Besides, in this world, Mega Evolution has not yet been discovered, which gives Beedrill some training value. But all those considerations are for the future. Now, Cain and Murkrow have to face 5 furious Beedrill flying towards them. When the 5 Beedrill approached, Cain used his system to scan them. 5 almost identical data profiles appeared. Pokémon, Beedrill, red. Gender, male. Level, 14. Type, bug, poison. Ability, swarm. Held item, none. Egg moves, none. Basic moves, Twin Needle, Fury Attack, Rage. Learned moves, none. Trademark moves, none. The 5 Beedrill had identical data, as if they had been cut from the same mold. Cain sighed in relief. Luckily, there were only 5, and their level and quality weren't high. Murkrow, use Astonish. Cain gave the most suitable order to deal with the 5 enraged Beedrill. Astonish could cause Pokémon to flinch, which would reduce the number of Beedrill Murkrow would have to face directly, thus easing the pressure. Even if no Beedrill flinched, the group attack from Astonish would deal considerable damage. Caw! Murkrow let out a sharp, piercing cry directed straight at the 5 unsuspecting Beedrill. The sharp sound penetrated the brains of several Beedrill, and 2 of them froze in place, trembling with fear. The other 3 continued flying toward Murkrow, their stingers glowing with a purple light, ready to use Twin Needle. Murkrow, use Gust on the 3 Beedrill in front. Finish them first. Cain continued giving orders. In an instant, Murkrow flapped its wings, gathering flying-type energy with impressive speed. A white tornado appeared in front of the 3 Beedrill, enveloping them completely. Due to the type advantage, the 3 Beedrill were swept up by the tornado and began spinning in the air. When the tornado dissipated, 2 of the Beedrill fell to the ground, losing their ability to fight, while the third barely remained standing. With a single move, Murkrow had defeated 2 Beedrill and left the third barely hanging on. Only 2 Beedrill remained, who had just recovered from their paralysis. Cain was satisfied with this outcome. Although part of the credit was due to the type advantage, much of it was also thanks to Murkrow's growing strength. With a superior natural ability, Murkrow was mastering its energy better, and its gust attack was becoming increasingly powerful. Use Peck to finish off the remaining one, and then use Gust again to finish off the other two. Murkrow responded instantly, flying at high speed, its wings leaving a dark trail. Maintaining the tailwind state, Murkrow struck the remaining Beedrill with a peck, knocking it out. Without wasting any time, Murkrow rushed toward the last two Beedrill, who had just recovered. The Beedrill, who initially had a clear numerical advantage, suddenly realized they were the weaker ones. Although they were frightened, Murkrow gave them no respite. With a swift movement, another white tornado appeared and enveloped them. The cutting wind hit them mercilessly, leaving them gravely wounded. When the tornado disappeared, both Beedrill lay on the ground, incapacitated. With Murkrow landing in front of Cain, all the Kakuna and Beedrill in this area of the forest had been eliminated. A buzzing sound echoed through the forest again. Beedrill is truly a terrifying Pokémon, always acting in swarms. If one of them is attacked, the entire swarm mobilizes to defend it. Perhaps Beedrill is the most united Pokémon in the Pokémon world. This time, the buzzing was even louder than before, with at least dozens of Beedrill approaching. Cain called Murkrow and turned to retreat. There was no need to face the entire swarm. A good strategist knows when to retreat. When the Beedrill swarm arrived at the scene, they found only chaos in the bodies of Kakuna and Beedrill. Filled with fury, they began to search for the culprit. Just when the swarm was about to panic, an even louder buzzing was heard. A Beedrill, clearly larger than the rest, appeared at the center, its face fierce and stern. With a roar, the large Beedrill ordered the entire swarm to calm down and organized them into a disciplined formation before disappearing into the forest. If Cain had been there, he would have known that this Beedrill was the leader of the swarm. Its larger size was due to its leadership position. But Cain had already returned to the Metapod territory. As he walked, he took out some poke blocks from his storage and gave them to Murkrow to recover its strength. Although Murkrow hadn't taken any damage, it was important for it to always be in top shape for any eventuality. Murkrow, grateful for the poke blocks, devoured them eagerly. The energy began to flow within its body, mixing the dark and flying types. With each battle, Murkrow absorbed the energy from the poke blocks more effectively, growing stronger. The use of poke blocks was proving to be a great advantage. While other Pokémon might need time to recover after a battle, Murkrow, thanks to the poke blocks, recovered much faster and more effectively. Are you ready, Murkrow? Today's work won't be easy. Cain gently stroked Murkrow's shiny black feathers, asking softly. Craw! Murkrow nodded eagerly, its wings flapping with determination. Cain smiled. Everything was set to execute the day's plan. Chapter 19, Retreat. For almost the entire afternoon, Cain and Murkrow employed guerrilla tactics to the fullest, attacking one area and immediately retreating, resting briefly, and then attacking another part of the forest. Thanks to this strategy, they managed to wipe out 4 groups of Kakuna throughout the afternoon. Although each Kakuna provided minimal growth for Murkrow, little by little, it accumulated experience and managed to level up, reaching level 14. However, every time they wiped out a group of Kakuna, a few, in their extreme rage, evolved prematurely into Beedrill. But for Murkrow, even a level 13 or 14 Beedrill was as easy to defeat as a Kakuna, not to mention those that had just evolved. Moreover, Murkrow was becoming increasingly familiar with Beedrill, and hardly wasted any energy in defeating all its enemies. With the help of his system, Cain scanned each Beedrill that appeared, recording all the data into his system. Of the dozens of Beedrill they encountered, most had red potential, with only a few having orange potential. This fact showed how rare it was to find Pokémon with high potential. Murkrow, with its green potential, was practically 1 in a million. The difference between red and orange potential Beedrill was clear. Orange potential Beedrill had an additional egg move and, in general, their growth was much more robust. At the same level, a red potential Beedrill was incapacitated after a single attack from Murkrow, while an orange potential one required at least 2 attacks to be defeated. It is for this clear difference that Pokémon with higher potential are so valuable. This also showed how much Team Rocket was investing in this test, given that the Pokémon with the lowest potential among the 300 participants had orange potential. The constant battles were beginning to affect Murkrow. Although it had the energy from mid-level poke blocks, mental fatigue was starting to outweigh physical exhaustion. Can you still keep going? Cain carefully massaged Murkrow to help it recover faster. Noticing the look of relief on its face, he asked gently. Murkrow nodded, though it wasn't much in the mood to speak, enjoying Cain's attention. Then let's make one last attempt before it gets dark. After a short rest, Cain and Murkrow left the safety of the Metapod territory and ventured into Beedrill territory. After wiping out several groups, the forests with Kakuna on the outskirts were fewer and fewer, and to find more, Cain had to venture deeper, which increased the risk since the Beedrill appeared faster. This time, after advancing for about 20 minutes, Cain finally found a forest teeming with Kakuna hanging from the trees. Upon seeing the large number of Kakuna, Cain couldn't help but wonder how it was possible for Beedrill to have such a high reproduction capacity. If there were no natural predators, these Pokémon could dominate the entire test island. Fortunately, nature follows the law of the strongest. Some Pokémon are so powerful that not even a large number of Beedrill could defeat them, which prevents these Pokémon from completely dominating. Just as Murkrow was preparing to use Gust to finish off all the Kakuna in one fell swoop, several Beedrill emerged from the trees. Cain frowned as he saw them appear so quickly. Something wasn't right, those Beedrill had to be guarding the area beforehand. This situation indicated that the Beedrill colony was taking Cain and Murkrow very seriously. As a species that lives in swarms, it's not common for them to leave a place under the watch of just a few members. So their appearance could only mean one thing: they were prepared for Cain and Murkrow's arrival. As if they had stirred up a hornet's nest, a deafening buzzing resounded as more and more Beedrill emerged from the forest. The sound was like a scream of fury, and the Beedrill, already aggressive by nature, glared with rage at the duo who had wiped out nearly 100 of their companions and countless Kakuna in just one day. This act, bordering on genocide, had unleashed their full wrath. Upon seeing the approaching horde of Beedrill, Cain adopted a serious expression. It seemed the Beedrill colony had a formidable leader who even knew how to set traps. It was like facing a wolf pack. One or two might not be dangerous, but a pack led by an alpha wolf was far more fearsome. The Beedrill colony was behaving like a wolf pack, with more and more members appearing, gradually forming a circling trap. They couldn't afford to be surrounded. If they were, they'd be in serious danger. Cain began to quickly think of an escape route. The system was active, analyzing the situation. Craw craw! Murkrow roared at the Beedrill colony. For him, even if the number of Beedrill doubled, he would still be faster than them. But this would put Cain in danger, so he began to grow impatient, challenging the Beedrill. Before the Beedrill's encirclement was complete, Cain slowly started retreating with Murkrow. Bzzz. A louder buzz came from the rear of the Beedrill colony. Suddenly, as if they had received an order, all the Beedrill seemed to go mad. Their red eyes became even more intense, and their wings buzzing grew louder, like a rising wave. Murkrow, use Gust in front to block them. Then quickly use Peck to finish off the Beedrill behind us. We need to retreat now. Cain gave the order calmly. Fortunately, the Beedrill's circle wasn't complete, most were in front, while only a few were behind. If they could eliminate the Beedrill behind them before the front ones broke through the wind barrier, they could escape. In an instant, Murkrow summoned all the flying-type energy it could and created two massive white whirlwinds that rose between the Beedrill and them, blocking their advance. Any Beedrill that tried to pass through the whirlwinds was immediately swept up and incapacitated. Without looking back, Cain pulled a brown cloth from his belt and wrapped it around his head, covering everything except his eyes. He then dashed into the forest's depths. As for the two Beedrill coming directly at him, Cain ignored them, trusting Murkrow to finish them off after using Gust. Bang! Bang! Just as Cain expected, Murkrow didn't disappoint. With a dark flash, Murkrow used Peck and knocked out the two remaining Beedrill, leaving them unconscious on the ground. Peck was also a flying-type move, making it especially effective against Beedrill. With the Beedrill eliminated, Murkrow flew over Cain, ready to escort him during the escape. Buzz! Whoosh! Bang! Suddenly, a massive figure emerged from one of the whirlwinds, unfazed by Murkrow's attack. With a roar, a sharp stinger pierced through the tornado, dispersing it. Finally, Cain could see it was a giant Beedrill, at least twice the size of a regular one. Cain glanced quickly behind him, and his heart skipped a beat. It was the leader of the Beedrill colony, a Pokémon with the potential to become the absolute ruler. The distance was too great for the system to scan its data, but by its presence, it seemed even more formidable than the Pinsir they had defeated earlier. However, now wasn't the time to stay and fight. Although the leader Beedrill was a special Pokémon, Cain knew he couldn't stop. He picked up speed, and together with Murkrow, swiftly retreated. Murkrow launched several more gust attacks to block the way as they fled until they finally managed to leave the Beedrill colony behind. After about half an hour, Cain and Murkrow successfully evaded the Beedrill colony entirely. Deep within the Metapod territory, Cain collapsed, exhausted, against a tree, breathing heavily as he finally took a break. Fortunately, the nutrition he had been receiving had given him the necessary energy, and along with the breathing techniques he had learned in his previous life, he was able to endure the run. While catching his breath, Cain reflected on the number of Beedrill he had seen during the escape, feeling a growing headache. Initially, he had thought the Beedrill colony wasn't fully formed yet, and that even if there were many of them, with the right strategy, they could be eliminated little by little, turning it into the perfect place for Murkrow to train. But he hadn't expected the colony to quickly develop a leader capable of leading them so skillfully, which now posed a major challenge for Cain. In a colony, the difference between having a leader or not is immense. A competent leader can unite the group and turn it into a cohesive and lethal force. The appearance of the leader Beedrill had almost brought Cain and Murkrow's days to an end. Although the situation was complicated, it would be a shame for Cain and Murkrow to give up now. During their escape, Cain barely managed to catch a quick glimpse of the leader Beedrill, with no time to scan its data. But it was clear that, to have taken control of the colony so quickly and without dispute, it must have considerable potential and strength. Chapter 20, Pokémon Egg. This is a real challenge, isn't it? If all opponents lacked resistance, Murkrow would get bored too. In eliminating the Beedrill, Murkrow found no pleasure in the battle, only following Cain's orders strictly. Cain had noticed this, but he had no other choice until the leader Beedrill appeared. Cain could clearly feel the excitement emanating from Murkrow. While gently stroking Murkrow's sleek feathers, Cain shook his head and smiled resignedly, saying, "You're really a warrior, hey? As soon as a decent opponent shows up, you get all excited like this. Caw, caw. To defeat a strong opponent with our own hands is the highest form of respect." Murkrow, excited, hopped back and forth, unable to contain his joy. Cain rubbed his head, feeling a bit of a headache. The Beedrill colony was now like a hedgehog curled up, difficult to attack. He decided to put that issue aside for now. Looking at the sun hanging in the sky, he jumped down from the tree. Night was approaching, and if they were to face the Beedrill, it would have to wait until the next day. He returned to the small hill he knew, lit a campfire, and, as usual, gave Murkrow a full massage. "Murkrow, if you want to face the Beedrill leader, you still lack a bit of strength. Prepare for a tough battle," Cain said while roasting some dried meat on a stick. "Caw." Hearing this, Murkrow nodded seriously. If he could become stronger, enduring a bit of hardship was nothing. Cain smiled slightly. "Then let's start now, with some exercise after dinner," he said, while looking for 2 logs, each weighing about 5 kilograms. He tied them to Murkrow's wings with ropes he had prepared beforehand. As Murkrow flapped his wings lightly with the logs attached, he felt a noticeable weight. What was once as easy as flying like drinking water now became much more difficult. After a while, Murkrow finally adapted to the new pressure, needing more effort with each wing beat. Seeing that Murkrow had already adjusted to the weight, Cain nodded. "It looks like you've gotten used to it. Now fly around this tree 100 times. The tree was so large that 3 people together could barely wrap their arms around it. Its branches extended wide, and flying around it was about 20 meters per lap. Without hesitation, Murkrow began flying around the tree, lap after lap, not stopping. Night fell. Cain and Murkrow, having finished their training, gradually fell asleep. Another day had passed, 4 days since the last trial. Today was the 5th day, and in 2 days there would be another test. So regardless of whether or not they could resolve the Beedrill problem, in 1 more day, they would have to return. Cain lay alone, hidden in a bush, his body flat against the ground, covered with leaves and grass, with a scarf made from pieces of cloth wrapped around his head and camouflage paint on his face. Only his eyes were visible. His body emitted a strong scent of tree sap. If someone didn't get close, it was impossible to realize that there was a person there. Some small yellow Pokémon with red eyes flew over the bush where he was hiding, not noticing him at all, until the last of them flew by. That's right, the person hiding was Cain. In his previous life, as a member of Team Rocket, he had carried out all kinds of missions. This simple camouflage technique was no problem for him. Why was he in this situation? Because, at this moment, Cain's presence interfered with Murkrow's performance. If it weren't for protecting him, with Murkrow's speed, the Beedrill wouldn't have been able to catch him. So Cain decided to hide, waiting for all the Beedrill to chase Murkrow, so he could then calmly escape. The Pokémon that had flown over him were, of course, the enraged Beedrill. He waited for another 10 minutes until a black Pokémon landed softly next to the bush and let out a gentle caw. The Pokémon that had returned was Murkrow, who had just lured away the Beedrill. Following Cain's orders, Murkrow maintained a steady speed, slow enough for the Beedrill to follow but not so slow that they could catch him. When the distance was sufficient, Murkrow used Tailwind to fly at full speed, leaving the Beedrill behind and then returning to Cain's hiding spot. Finally, Cain, who had remained completely still, slowly stood up, dusted off his clothes, and stretched his stiff legs. His untrained body was not used to staying hidden for so long. Cain took out a black poke block from his storage space and gave it to Murkrow to replenish his energy, nodding in satisfaction as a smile appeared on his face. Now that the Beedrill colony had been lured away, he could calmly explore the center of their territory. Walking through a forest where it seemed no human or Pokémon had stepped, Cain noticed that the ground was covered in weeds and bushes, with no clear path. There were nibbled leaves on the trees and ground, and some branches were wrapped in silk, probably left by the Weedle in their earlier stages. The air was filled with the smell of fresh leaves. Cain, along with Murkrow, headed straight to the center. After walking for about 10 minutes, they reached the heart of the territory. There they found an ancient tree, almost 3 times the size of the tree Cain usually stayed at, with a structure similar to a bird's nest but made of mud. With Murkrow's help, Cain climbed to the edge of the nest, and when he saw what was inside, his eyes widened in astonishment. Inside the huge nest, there were a large number of Beedrill eggs, all nearly identical. If all these eggs hatched, they would turn into a large number of Weedle, which would eventually evolve into an army of Beedrill. Bug-type Pokémon, although they have the disadvantage of a short lifespan, reproduce so quickly that other Pokémon can't match them. Still surprised, Cain activated the system to scan all the data of the Pokémon eggs. A series of data flashed quickly before his eyes. Most of the eggs had a red quality, with a few orange ones occasionally standing out. Given the huge number, there were even 1 or 2 with yellow quality. After a while, all the data had been scanned. Out of a total of over 500 Beedrill eggs, only 3 had yellow quality, and 25 had orange quality. Cain took a deep breath, feeling a headache. What should he do with all these Pokémon eggs? Destroying them held no value or purpose, and while Cain could be ruthless, it was only towards his enemies. As Cain pondered, Murkrow, who was nearby, patted his leg. Caw, caw. Murkrow tapped his leg, raising his head and pointing toward the upper branches. Following Murkrow's direction, Cain saw a smaller, more elaborate nest at the top of the tree. With Murkrow's help, Cain approached the upper nest. This must have been the leader Beedrill's nest. Inside the nest were 3 Pokémon eggs. He activated the system again, and the data that appeared left him speechless. Of the 3 eggs, 2 had yellow quality, and 1 even had green quality. Pokémon, Weedle, egg form, green. Gender, female. Level, 1. Type, bug, poison. Ability, unknown. Held item, none. Egg moves, bug bite, focus energy. Basic moves, none. Learned moves, none. Trademark moves, none. Cain swallowed unconsciously. This was the first time he had seen a green quality Pokémon before it was born. Although it was just a Weedle, when a Pokémon had green quality, the limitations of its species were much smaller. This egg must be the child of the leader Beedrill. Seeing the quality of these 3 eggs, the leader Beedrill's quality must be yellow, or even green. In quality inheritance, unless something unusual happens, a Pokémon's quality is usually within a similar range to its parents. This means that if the parents have yellow quality, their offspring will be at least orange, and generally yellow. If they are especially talented, they could even be green. If the parents have different qualities, there will be various combinations, but the lowest quality will be no more than 1 level below the lowest parent, and the highest will not exceed the highest parent by more than 1 level. So, the parents of the green quality Weedle egg likely had yellow quality and might even be green. Cain took a random piece of cloth and wrapped the green quality Weedle egg in it. He tied it firmly to his back and jumped lightly to make sure it wouldn't fall. Pokémon eggs can't be stored in the storage space, as they would lose their vitality and become dead eggs. The storage space is generally for inanimate objects. If something alive is placed inside, it dies instantly. Cain wouldn't let a green quality Pokémon egg slip away. Whether he used it himself in the future or sold it to Team Rocket or someone else, he could get something valuable in return. As a former Pokémon hunter, Cain was entirely familiar with these kinds of operations.
Thanks for listening.